I will call the meeting, the Transportation Finance and Policy Committee to order. First item on the agenda is the roll call. If Mr. Dodge could please take the roll.
Chair Cagle.
Present.
Cagle, present. Representative Hornstein.
Present.
Hornstein, present. Representative Petersburg.
Present.
Petersburg, present. Representative Barr.
Present.
Barr, present. Representative Bernardi.
Present.
Bernardi, present. Representative Elkins.
Present.
Elkins, present. Representative Frederick.
Present.
Frederick, present. Representative Hausman.
Present.
Hausman, present. Representative Heinrich. Representative Heinrich. Representative Kosnick. Representative Kosnick. Representative Mason.
Present.
Mason, present. Representative Murphy.
Murphy, present.
Murphy, present. Representative Nelson.
Nelson, present.
Nelson, present. Representative Olson.
Present.
Olson, present. Representative Richardson.
Present.
Richardson, present. Representative Torkelson.
Present.
Torkelson, present. Representative West.
Present.
West, present. There is a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Next up is approval of the minutes from yesterday, Wednesday, April 7th. Representative Petersburg, have you had a chance to take a look at the minutes?
I did, and it was very simple. I think all of the testifiers were listed as well, so I would move approval of yesterday's minutes.
All right, Representative Petersburg moves approval of the minutes. If everybody could unmute for a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion prevails. All right, so today we're going to be moving the DE2 amendment to House File 1684 and take up amendments to the DE2 and direct staff to make any technical corrections as needed. When we normally meet from 1 to 2:30, today we have until 5:30, so yay, to complete our business as needed. We will take up the author's amendment first and then move on to remaining amendments. So Chair Hornstein, I understand you would like to move your bill, House File 1684, to the Tax Committee.
Yeah, that would be my motion, Madam Chair.
So moved. And would you like to move the DE2 amendment to House File 1684?
Yes, I move the DE2 amendment.
So moved, Mr. Chair. So the motion is before us. I understand you have two authors amendments. We'll take those up first. The first author's amendment is coded A16, and the second is A23. We'll take up the A16 first. I understand you'd like to move the A16 and incorporate the changes and incorporate a change to lines 2.1 and 2.5 of that amendment, correct?
Yes. Okay, yeah, I have sort of all of the provisions just listed under the A16. So maybe we could have, if we could have Mr. Burris just, and I will have comments on this, but if Mr. Burris could start with the A16 and then we can move that one first and then the second one. Is that your preference, Madam Chair?
Sounds good. Mr. Burris?
Madam Chair, members, so the A16 amendment has a series of technical revisions and clarifications that have been identified through some preliminary review of the DE amendment in the revisor's office. This is to largely to conform with drafting conventions and revise some internal drafting system technical issues that were identified with the DE2. And then there are also a couple of substantive changes in the A16 amendment. The first of those is to revise the driver services appropriation. That's found starting on page 1, line 9. There's also a revision in the amount identified under a rider for driver services that relates to the driver's license eligibility and documentation requirements in the bill. The second of the changes is also found on page 1, and that is a revision to driver's license exam location requirements. I'm just bringing up to make sure I'm identifying the right pieces of the amendment that go to that change. The change is to limit or reduce the scope of the requirements for number of driver's license exam stations, and that is found on page 1, starting at line 14. It would eliminate the 60 miles of maximum distance of travel from each city in the state to the exam location, so that the stations would continue. The requirement would be revised to only apply to require stations in a county or an adjacent county. Then the next change of possible note is also on page 1, starting at line 17. This revises a couple of transfers. There are currently a series of transfers over fiscal years 21 through 24 between general fund and a couple of accounts. This language modifies those transfers. And then, Mr. Chair, I believe the remainder of the changes are more technical in nature. There is a deletion and insertion of a section that's found on page 2, starting at line 14, and that's the substantive language is the same. It's to resolve an internal drafting system issue.
Okay.
Chair Hornstein?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I appreciate that, Mr. Burris, and I just wanted to comment about a couple of the more substantive parts of this amendment. As you can see, some of this is very just technical corrections in nature, but with some of those allocations from driver and vehicle services, those have a direct relationship with some of the bills that are included in the in our DE2, including, so let's start with just a couple that I think are important for the committee to know about. First, we have some additional items that were called to our attention by DVS, related to issues such as the driver license for all bill and some of the impacts that has on that account. The driver's license suspension reform that we have strong support for among many in this committee, fee stacking issues, that is also updated and addressed in this issue, in this amendment. And then finally, based on testimony from yesterday and other feedback we got, particularly from DVS, Ms. Corey, if she is here, I want to thank her. And I don't know, Representative Koznick is on the line. I want to thank him, for addressing this 60-mile piece that was added in. That was language that we had not had a chance to vet with DVS. We had vetted the earlier language, which is now reinserted into the bill that we had started with. And that language, I think, gets at in a little more effective way, gets at the issue that we're trying to address here, which is making sure that every Minnesotan has at least access to a driver testing station within a reasonable drive. Again, we had heard some testimony expressing concerns with the way we had laid it out. Again, while the language that's in the bill now isn't necessarily, was not in the governor's recommendations, we added on to those recommendations to make sure that we could have again, a more effective way for people to get access to their driver exams. And again, based on some of the testimony we have received since our original language was put forward in the bill, we made this revision. So again, I want to say we started out with this, but then when we released the bill, we added that extra layer, which I think now is not necessary based on the testimony that we received. So those are that's the rationale for that particular change. And then I also wanted to again mention the provisions around the reforms that were made in driver revocation, license revocation, and the license driver license for all bill. Happy to take any questions from committee members about, again, the reason for those provisions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I forgot to mention too, if there's any members of the public that are on the call that would like to testify on amendments, please use the raised hand function. I saw that Director Corey had turned her camera on. I'm not sure. Would you like to address the amendment at all, Ms. Corey?
Madam Chair, no, I just want to be available for any questions at all. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. So Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Chair, and or maybe Matt Burris. Can you remind us again that the transfer changes in subdivision 3 on page 19, going from $2 million over the biennium to $10 million going to the general fund? Is that coming back to transportation in any way, or I'm trying to remember exactly how that fits into the bill.
Chair Hornstein?
I'll defer to Mr. Burris on that.
Mr. Burris?
Madam Chair, Representative Petersburg, Mr. Lee might also have some comments on that. I'd say just a couple of points. First, the transfers that are identified in the A16 amendment, revised transfers that one of the transfers that's in the delete all amendment. So it's a replacement. The amounts are spread between fiscal years 23 and 24. So that's not a total for one biennium. It's across two different biennia. And then the other thing that I just might note in setting the context of the transfers is that both those amounts go to the general fund. There aren't transfers from the general fund. There is, however, general fund spending in the bill with a total based on the numbers that we are aware of at this point, total that would be within the overall Transportation Committee target.
Mr. Lee, anything to add? You're muted still.
Sorry about that, Madam Chair and Representative Petersburg. Yeah, I think Matt gave a good summary there. So the overall transfer amount from the vehicle services account to the general fund in the underlying DE2 amendment would be $2 million in fiscal year 24, which is in the tails. And under the author's amendment would be $4 million in the upcoming biennium, fiscal 22 and 23, and then go to $6 million in the tails. So a total change of $8 million, or a change in the DE16 amendment of $8 million, and then a total transfer from the vehicle services account to the general fund of $10 million.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I kind of understood all of that, but I'm trying to figure out why the necessity was when we've got a target from general fund going into transportation, why we would take transportation dollars and put back into the general fund. What critically dedicated that need for that transfer out of vehicle services, because we could have also just transferred vehicle services into something else directly within transportation. What was the need that it had to go to general fund, and then we're taking it back out in the targets? So I'm trying to figure out that particular process. If anybody could help me out with that.
Mr. Lee?
Madam Chair and Representative Petersburg, certainly. So the general fund target applies to either general fund spending or foregone revenue as a result of proposed legislation. So in the transportation bill and as part of the transportation target, there is both general fund spending but also foregone revenue. Part of that foregone revenue piece is the fees associated with the bill that was heard in committee by Representative Becker Finn related to fee revocation or driver's revocation fees, fee stacking and modifications of those. That fiscal note had a general fund impact because assuming that that legislation became law, there would be a loss from current practice of the general fund receiving those fees. So it was a cost to the general fund, though it wasn't spending. So that cost still factors into the overall general fund target. That amount was around $324,000 of revenue lost to the general fund as a result of a proposed change in the transportation budget area and in the DE2 amendment. So it would be a cost to the general fund. And as of yesterday, the department had a slightly different estimate, a higher estimate for the impact of that of those changes, and as a result of some modifications. They estimated very rough estimate was that it would have a total impact of around $3 million a year, with some split between the general fund and the special revenue accounts in driver services, not vehicle services. So there would be, based off of revised information that has yet to come from the department, potential further loss to the general fund. So the $4 million transfers from the vehicle services account in fiscal 22 and 23, and an additional $4 million in the tails would mitigate that potential general fund loss, if that makes sense. So it's not more spending, but a mitigation of loss to the general fund, which would still count against the target. I hope I answered your question.
Representative Petersburg?
Yeah, thank you. I was trying to figure out what the need was to reimburse the general fund. And I think you were clarifying that because of our change in how fines and other things were collected, it was going to reduce general fund. And so this is replacing that because of transportation decisions and bills forward. So I think that makes sense. I was unclear as to why we needed to replenish the general fund. And I think it's getting clearer. It's no longer mud, it's just murky. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Mason.
Much, Madam Chair. And to the author, I mean, I believe yesterday we were going over the 60 miles regarding the testing sites. And I just want to make sure that we're clear about what we're doing here. So the way the bill is going through now, do we now have more testing sites? Or are we?
Well, we have, yes, Madam Chair and Representative Mason, we have more testing sites than are currently under law. And we're just simply clarifying, the distances that, we're instructing DVS to have testing sites available. This might be one, since this is important, Madam Chair and Representative Mason, so glad you asked this question. And maybe this might be one for Ms. Corey, because this has, important impacts on our citizens and constituents. So it might be best for Ms. Corey to maybe just very briefly go over, exactly what this change from the status quo involves.
Ms. Corey, welcome to the committee. If you could just state your name for the record.
Emma Corey, Driver and Vehicle Services Director at the Department of Public Safety. Thank you, Madam Chair, Chair Hornstein, and Representative Mason. Appreciate the opportunity to speak on this point. Yes, the language now with this amendment really allows us to be able to look at the current exam station map and add so that every Minnesotan has an exam station in their county or in an adjacent county. The 60-mile language would have made it where we might have had to increase the number of exam stations further than even the 93 satellite stations in the past, because it would, and they would not be the most highly functioning stations, because there are certain areas that might not warrant a 7-day, a 5-day location. So the language where it stands right now gives us the most flexibility to add to our current model. As Chair Hornstein said, we are looking at adding about 4 to 6 additional exam stations, but it doesn't put us in a spot where we would, because of the 60 miles, have to add exam stations where they may not be the best, most efficient use of a new facility. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. And one other question, my understanding is right now is that the testing stations are not actually, doesn't allow the applicants to get their applications and photos taken, that they have to go to the deputy registrars.
Director Corey?
So what happened with, okay, at least if we're making it more convenient stations, but if they're not actually, if you're going to get a test and you still can't get your get the application filled out, how helpful is that?
Director Corey?
Madam Chair, Representative Mason, any exam station that a candidate, that a customer goes to and gets their test, absolutely, they can make the application at every one of those locations. They would not need to go to a different location to get the application.
The photo taken?
Absolutely, at the exam station where they do their road test. Yes,
That should be okay.
that service is available. Yep.
Representative Mason?
I apologize for interrupting. Okay, because I've been told that that is not happening, that the deputy registrars are getting people that have had their tests elsewhere, and then they have to go to the deputy registrars to actually get their photos taken and get their applications filled out.
Director Corey?
Thank you, Chair Kegel. Yes, what I will acknowledge, Representative Mason, is during the time of the heart of COVID, there were times when we were redirecting other applications to the deputy registrars. But the folks that take their test, they are our highest priority so that they don't have 2 stops. So during COVID, when we were down to a very small number of stations, at that time, we were redirecting applications to deputy registrars in the area. However, now for several months, since October 1st, we have resumed taking applications at our exam stations. And when it comes to a road test at our exam stations, those candidates are our highest priority so that they can get both things done at the same location.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Representative Barr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Hornstein, I wanted to thank you for including the language in 2.3 and 2.5, excluding the physical disabilities from the 200% tax. So I wanted to thank you for that. Even though it still is a tax that punishes success, I do want to thank you for recognizing that some people who have not had success have to spend sometimes an exorbitant amount of money just to have transportation. So thank you.
And Madam Chair and Representative Barr, there'll be an update on that too coming soon to an amendment near you. But I appreciate that.
Representative Koznick?
Thank you, Chair Cagle. Representative Hornstein and committee members, I appreciate your intent and effort in removing that 60-mile barrier. I think it was just kind of cumbersome and added to the expense of the department. But there was the OLA audit here, if I can show you. I would encourage members, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that. We didn't get a hearing, Representative Chair Hornstein, about the third-party testing. We talked about it in committee last year. The other body is actively pursuing it. I think if you look through here, there are some recommendations and some advantages of third-party testing that can resolve some of these issues for people that have to drive farther if they live in more remote areas. And so I think we're on the right track. And if you're curious, on page 14, there's a nice map of where the regional hubs are for the exam stations and then some of the satellite facilities. And then more importantly, on page 24, from March 2020, so I'd be curious to know what the update is. It has the state broken into regions and what the wait times are to get a road test in each of those regions. I'd be curious what a more updated exhibit like that would be for each of the regions. And Director Corey, I think it's common sense that you would then focus your resources to where those wait times are the longest. And it appears to be kind of surprising to me, actually. A lot of the wait times were more in the metro area, up to 14 weeks, 10 weeks, 9 weeks. And so I just encourage you to kind of focus on that, but I think that's what you're already doing anyway. So I'm very critical of the wait times and having this be such a frustration for parents and families and people trying to get a test. But I do want to acknowledge your efforts to move forward to try to get that a better situation. This is just a basic function of government to be able to have somebody go in, take your exam, and go about your life to get from point A to point B, get to work, and the importance of being able to drive. So happy to continue to work with you. And I bring this up again to the committee because it'll be a discussion in conference committee of what the advantages are of third-party testing. And there's some very good best practices that 17 other states that do have third-party testing can complement what we currently have with the state examiners and provide better service to Minnesotans across the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Koznick. Representative Barr, your hand is still up. Is that just a leftover?
Sorry, just a leftover. I'll get it fixed.
Any other discussion to the A16 amendment? Representative Koznick, is your hand up again or still up?
No, I haven't had enough coffee yet today.
Okay. Don't think there's enough coffee in the world for me today. So, all right. So, there's seeing no further discussion to. Mr. Burris.
Madam Chair and members, I thought it might be good just to clarify the motion on this A16 amendment. My understanding is that there is an oral change that's being incorporated into this amendment, as you had stated. I just want to be sure that was clear to the committee. And that would be on page 2, delete lines 1 through 5.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on what Mr. Burris is referencing? Seeing none. So Chair Hornstein, would you like to renew your motion for the A16 with the incorporated changes?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll move the A16 with incorporated changes and ask for the committee's support.
Thank you. So if we could just unmute ourselves, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. So next we have the A23. Chair Hornstein, to your second amendment, the A23, would you like to move your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to move incorporation of the A23. And then I'll have a couple things to say about this, but again, I would ask Mr. Burris to let the committee know. This is an amendment that was not posted, was posted a little bit after our deadline. However, I did talk with Representative Petersburg about it, and I believe that we're in agreement on the need for this amendment. So I hope to receive support from all members for it. But I'd like Mr. Burris to, again, briefly, this isn't as long as the first one, so, but I'd like Mr. Burris and/or Mr. Lee to be a part of the presentation here.
Mr. Burris.
Madam Chair and members, the A23 amendment eliminates a couple of the tax-related proposals. The first of those is the rate increase on higher value vehicles as part of the registration tax. And that's found starting at page 1, line 13. It's 113 through 115. And then the second elimination is of the luxury surcharge on the motor vehicle sales tax. That's found on page 1, line 16 of the amendment. And then finally, earlier in the amendment, there are some updates to summary totals and appropriation amounts that are the result of the revenue that's no longer available to be appropriated because of the elimination of the tax proposals.
Thank you. And Mr. Lee, did you have anything to add?
Madam Chair and members, no, I think that covered it pretty concisely.
Thank you. So Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I had spoken with Chair Hornstein earlier last night, and I do think that this provision, where it has some interesting merits, it was appearing to be more and more difficult to implement. And so I think it needs some more work, and I think it's appropriate for us not to include it in this bill at this time. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg. Any further discussion to the A23 amendment? Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank you too, Madam Chair, for your advice and counsel on this as well. Members, I took to heart public testimony that we received yesterday. There was very helpful membership engagement on the committee. I want to thank in particular Representative Olson and Representative Barr for their comments and engagement on this. And Ms. Backus, we had others as well that testified. And I agree with Representative Petersburg that I think that I do not disagree with the intent of this, with the with the overall interest in obtaining a small amount of new revenue for roads and bridges. But Representative Vice Chair Cagle and I did have a conversation yesterday and felt that this needed a little bit more work. And so I appreciate very much her efforts. And just so members know, I mean, I think Mr. Lee can correct me. You have it on the amendment here, but I think we're talking about a couple $1 million out of the overall budget increase that we have in this bill. So it's a relatively minor amount. We understand the implications of that. However, I think important questions were raised, and I'm listening. And for that reason, we decided to move forward with the A23.
Mr. Lee, did you want to speak to the amount?
Certainly, Madam Chair and members, the approximate amount of the high value vehicle provisions that are being removed in this amendment totals to about a revenue increase of $3.6 million a year.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Is there any further discussion to the A23 amendment? Seeing none, if you guys could just unmute yourselves. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? Motion prevails. All right, next up, we have the A1. So we'll now be going in numerical order. So the A1, Representative Frederick, would you like to offer this amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right, could you please tell us about the A1 amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the bridge grant program language that's already included in Chair Hornstein's bill seeks to clarify language that already existed, talking about the amount of money that can be allocated towards bridges, and it basically describes that the overall projects, that if they're working on roads and bridges, that overall projects can be more than 7 million, as long as but the bridge grant program money itself is focused on the total cost of the bridge, and it seeks to make that very clear. So the amendment takes language from this bill that was from the Senate side, and the clarification that they sought there, and adopts that language into our bill as well.
Thank you. Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, my question's already been answered in that this language is what's already been incorporated into the Senate bill. This provision was originally in my bill a few years ago, and I do agree that changes are appropriate and support this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Torkelson. Is there any further discussion to the A1 amendment? Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll also join Representative Torkelson in asking for support for this amendment. I want to thank Representative Frederick for carrying this change, this update to existing law, and also our representatives from the cities and counties who helped this along the way and did a lot of the heavy lifting on both in both the House and the Senate. Work is much appreciated.
Thank you. So seeing no further discussion, again, if you guys just want to unmute yourself, Representative Frederick moved the A1 amendment. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, motion prevails. I wish I had a home gavel. All right, the next amendment is the A2 amendment. Representative Koznick, you wanted to offer this amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to just speak to the amendment, and I won't formally be offering it and won't need to withdraw it. But I just wanted to offer it to the committee. It's this is one of the provisions that we didn't actually have introduced or discussed as a bill during the committee session, but it is an idea that has been around for a while to have adjusting and modernizing our registration tab fees, and kind of taking the opposite approach, I think would be better for two reasons. Instead of asking Minnesotans to pay higher and higher tab fees when they buy a new car, I think we can, we should take a look at just extending out the amortization of the tab fees as the cars continue to be lasting longer on our roads, and drivers use that, and it's a more affordable way to do that for car owners, and significantly does bring new revenue to the transportation system. I offer this because I do recognize, as we've discussed over the last 7 terms and beyond of my time on the Transportation Committee, that there is a revenue challenge of dedicated funds into the transportation system, and we are behind, and there's a shortfall to just maintain our roads. If you've been following some of the media lately, one of the other ideas we talked about is that we need to reinvent and refine our transit system and transportation system. I think there'll be another amendment later on by Representative Barr talking about the Northstar line. But this is part of that you recognize that we do have a certain amount of obligations, and we're not meeting those obligations. So before we continue to expand what's required of us or asked of us, or might be intriguing to add new transit lines or a bunch of other roads and stuff, I think it's important that we meet our current responsibilities and obligations. And so Representative Hornstein, you and I have talked early in session about this idea. You kind of went the other opposite end of the tab fees, as was stated earlier, kind of penalizing success or people that want to purchase a new car. And sometimes you do have to buy a new car. It's part of our culture that to get to work and have safe vehicles for your family and stuff, and cars just continue to get more expensive. We heard yesterday that the auto sales are down, partially because people are staying at home more, I suppose, but also because of and probably more so because of the uncertainty of the economy. And so I think that asking new car owners that are spending, maybe 30, I think the average is about 37,000. It doesn't take a lot to get a car up to 40, 60, $70,000, and to ask those buyers to do the, write out $600, $700, $800 checks every year and to ask them to do more. I don't think that's the right way to go. The more affordable approach is what's laid out in here. And I offer it as an idea to the committee and to the chair, and especially as you conceded your luxury tax, mostly for its complications. But I think this is a more equitable way and a more affordable way to have Minnesotans who have told us they are willing to pay for better, safer roads because the maintenance on their cars, busting their axles on potholes and things like that, to pay maybe $25 or something more over a 10-year average is probably a much more affordable way to go. And so I will not even formally introduce this amendment, but I just wanted to offer it to the committee as a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Koznick. Representative Chair Hornstein, would you like to respond?
Thank you, and obvious. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Koznick, for bringing this forward. And there's much in your presentation that I agree with, particularly the urgency of raising revenue, and I appreciate your recognition of that and your problem solving on this. However, I do believe that, particularly in this moment, we have to really be conscious of making sure that those who have, many people have benefited in this very challenging time, income-wise, and many others have not. And I think that used car sales have been, I think, stable. And I think that Representative Cagle, who I would ask if she would choose to, can comment on this. This is her provision. And Representative Cagle, I supported her interest in looking at ways to make transportation funding more progressive. You frame it as penalizing success. We frame it as fairness. And for those that are driving older vehicles, we're giving them a break in this bill. And I think that is fair and warranted. And I support Representative Cagle's initiative in this. And Madam Chair, if you don't wanted to make any comments, I would welcome those. But Representative Koznick, I want to stay in touch with you about this. I think that, there may be some possibilities here. I think that we've had some bipartisan interest in the past on looking at registration fee issues. And so let's keep the conversation going, Representative Koznick. And I did appreciate your comments about our needs, our transportation needs. So Vice Chair Cagle, I'm interested to see if you have any comments here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just looking at the language, we hold the first, second, third, or in Representative Koznick's language, it holds the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth year of the depreciation schedule the same. But yet then when we get into these older vehicles, especially like when you're hitting the, year 9, it going up 15%, and year 10 going up 20%. And then where years 11 and 12 in the current depreciation would still be at that 10% or base level, or at the, I think for 11th and succeeding year, the amount would be $25. And so now we're putting on a 11th, 12th, and then a minimum fee of $45. And so really, if you're driving a 13-year-old car, there's a reason you're driving a 13-year-old car. And so I really don't think that pushing higher prices onto people who can least afford it is a good idea. I think if there was some sort of increase across from 100 down, I would feel a little bit more comfortable with that, being able to spread out the cost a bit more. But I really have, I have a hard time pushing higher costs onto people who can least afford it. So those are just my comments. And Representative Koznick, I see that you have your hand up. So Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate your comments and and thought on this, as well as Chair Hornstein for allowing us to discuss this. And it's probably something that, unfortunately, you didn't have a bill hearing on this, and we could have maybe had more time to do a little more research. I offer this as kind of a discussion point. It's obviously tweakable, and you can adjust some of the numbers and percentages a little bit, but it does go to the point that the majority of the cars on the road are older, and I don't know that there is a particularly strong or accurate data that it is lower income. You made the point that you want a more progressive, and you shouldn't be adding raising the cost to people that can least afford it. I believe you're the author of the one to index the gas tax. That's the most regressive, for sure. So I don't know that the argument's particularly consistent, but I think it's good to have this discussion, that you can adjust it at the lower end, and it continues. I think you're overlooking the point that it makes owning a car more affordable over the life of the car. And we also need to recognize that under the current law, after year 10, the majority of the cars get to be that age. I'm not sure that people should realistically expect to have safe roads that are plowed, clean, have the state trooper assistance, and all the stuff, that maintenance that we go on our road systems for about $45 or $35 a car if it's an 11-year-old car. And so I think it's important, and the point I want to make is that if you want to look for new revenue, do it in a much more affordable way in this tab modernization plan, and make it more affordable throughout the life of the car, instead of hitting people to disenfranchise people or discourage them from buying newer cars that are actually doing a lot of the heavy lifting. But we can generate more revenue in a more affordable way to the average family by doing something similar to what I've laid out here. But we've got a lot of other things to talk about, but I'm happy to take more questions, and happy to move on too. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Koznick. And so since he never formally offered the amendment, do you not need to formally withdraw the amendment? I guess
No, we
that's a
don't.
process.
We could move on.
All right, sounds good. So then next, unless there's any other discussion, doesn't look like there's any other hands up. So next on the agenda is the A3 amendment. Representative Elkins, would you like to offer this amendment?
I would, if Madam Chair.
All right, if you could please tell us about the, Representative Elkins moves the A3 amendment. If you could please tell us about your A3.
Yes, this is a small change in wording agreed upon among the stakeholders, DVS and the two deputy registrar organizations. And the intent is to clarify that when a deputy registrar wants to place a kiosk, and I should first have mentioned that this is related to the kiosk bill, to clarify that the deputy registrar must first make an application to DVS. And the reason for wanting to clarify that is to avoid turf battles among deputy registrars. So for example, if multiple deputy registrars wanted to put kiosks in the Mall of America, and there was a dispute about whose turf that was, it would be up to DVS to settle the turf war. But we have peace in the valley on this language. DVS and both of the deputy registrars organizations are in favor of this language.
Thank you, Representative Elkins. Is there any discussion to the amendment? Chair Hornstein, do you want to make any comments on the amendment?
Yeah, no, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Elkins, for your hard work on this. And I would ask the committee to support the A3 amendment.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, if you could all unmute. All those in favor of the A3 amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion prevails. Next up is the A4 amendment. Representative Barr, did you want to offer this amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to offer the A4.
Thank you. Please tell us about the A4 amendment.
The A4 amendment is removes the the indexing on fuel tax. The way I am reading this and the way it was explained earlier, if this provision were adopted, the national average of construction costs would be automatically added to the fuel tax every year. Ergo, without any legislative action, the fuel tax will increase year over year over year, because I don't see construction costs going down anytime soon. So this just would remove the automatic increase. I don't have necessarily an opposition to bringing it up for a vote every year if it was something like that, but to put any tax increase on automatic increase without legislative action, I don't think that's correct and not right, and that's why the purpose of this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Barr. So the indexing is one of my pieces of legislation. This is something that Alabama does. And I think you're exactly right in the fact that construction costs have been increasing and probably will continue to increase. So I kind of think of this as the last time Minnesota offered or passed a gas tax increase was 13 years ago. So imagine that you're working at a job for 13 years and they never give you a cost of living adjustment. And so your buying power kind of depreciates. And so we're really asking MnDOT to do more with less funding. And so I really hope that we can get more funding into transportation. And I just think that indexing the gas tax to keep up with inflation, that's simply what it's doing. It's keeping up with inflation, is the right thing to do if we want to make sure that our roads are safe. Representative Barr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't disagree with we're doing less with more, kind of as far as MnDOT, we're asking them to do more. I'm not disagreeing with that portion. I am disagreeing with the fact that it's on autopilot, that the legislature does not have to vote on this on a continual basis. If your language would have said the index inflation, it's determined and the legislature has to take a standalone vote on that every year to authorize the increase, that would be something totally different. This is non-transparent. It's on autopilot. The voters will get a tax increase every year and they will not be able to hold any of us accountable for that increase. And as far as Alabama goes, in my outside job, I was a long haul truck driver for many, many years. And I had to keep track of, I had to file a fuel tax report in every state I drove in quarterly. So I am well aware of states that have indexing and different methods and modes and how different states generate revenue with all extra permits. And there's a myriad of different things that different states do. And North Carolina had an automatic increase set up in theirs. And I want to say was about 4 or 5 years ago, they finally got rid of their automatic increase because it had increased to the point where they were collecting close to double of the amount of tax of all of their neighboring states. And it was starting to have a deleterious effect on all of their fueling stations and long haul trucking, because I can drive through multiple states and never stop for fuel. So if you're going to charge me an extra $15, $20, $40, $50 for the same amount of fuel, then I can just skip your state, pay the tax, and just penalize you. And then so these automatic tax increases do have an effect 15 and 20 years down the road once all these automatic things have kicked in. And so between the automatics and the long-term effects and the facts that the taxpayer will not be able to hold each of us accountable, I would urge adoption by the committee.
Thank you. Representative Hornstein?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Barr. I would just like to add a couple. I thought Vice Chair Cagle did a good job of explaining the importance of this in our bill. And, it's a combination of money sources, just back to our conversation about registration fees. We use registration fees, but we also, the fee on motor fuels is, really the workhorse of the system. And, this is where we raise the bulk of our resources for the new legislation that we have before us. And I don't have to tell you, and I'll make more mention of this at the end, but we are really in an infrastructure crisis. Our roads and bridges are deteriorating. And this, to me, is really a step forward, as I mentioned in my comments yesterday or on Tuesday. We had a larger fee increase, motor fuels fee increase 2 years ago, much larger. It also included indexing. And so this is really an effort, and I believe there is some necessity for that. But this is really an effort to move forward together. And I am pleased that this has been acknowledged by people that may not have supported new revenue in the past. I appreciated Commissioner Schulte's testimony yesterday. I don't always agree with him on issues, but he's straightforward and thoughtful. And he said yesterday, and I quote, your bill does include the escalation of the tax tied to construction costs of highways, which I think that's a fine plan. Anoka County, or I personally, don't have a problem with it. And so, you have conservative voices now joining us, in support of this. And I want to echo what Vice Chair Cagle said. It's not necessarily conservative or liberal. In the last 2 years alone, Chair Cagle had mentioned Alabama, which also uses this construction inflator, which we use in our bill. Arkansas, Virginia, the District of Columbia. There's now 22, so Arkansas and Alabama in particular. I mean, these are states, if we want to talk politics, have a Republican Senate, House, and governor. They've passed indexing just in the last 2 years. We have 22 states and the District of Columbia now. So almost half the country does this. It is not, an idea that is, that I think necessitates any political polarization. It is simply common sense. Construction costs are increasing. Roads are deteriorating. We can pay now a little bit. This is a penny. This is a penny the first year, a penny the second year. We can pay that now or pay a lot more later, members, because as you know, these projects don't go away. They get a lot more expensive. So if we're going to talk about fiscal responsibility, I think this is a really important step forward. And again, we had other testimony yesterday from people that haven't necessarily supported our revenue raisers in the past that are on board this year. So I think this is an idea that I think we can move forward together on. I hope both parties, and we've made a very large concession by just including indexing, but it's not a minor matter. We raised significant revenue this way. And I hope that as we move forward, we can continue to pick up the public support that I saw for us yesterday.
Thank you, Representative Hornstein.
I would
Representative
ask for no vote, by the way. Representative Barr, I appreciate, you are a trucker. You see the condition of our roads. And I, have always appreciated our conversations, but on this one, I would ask for no vote.
Representative Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Hornstein, yes, I do see the condition of our roads, and I'm not disagreeing that we need to at times raise revenue or raise the fuel tax because the inflationary costs, better fuel mileage. There are many, many factors that feed into why the fuel tax should be adjusted, and that's not the purpose of. That's not my objection to what you have there. My objection is to the automatic increase year over year. I am simply asking that I probably should have offered a couple of amendments on this to give you some options, but I believe the legislature should be accountable for that tax increase every year. I don't believe that it should be on autopilot. I'm not saying that we should, it shouldn't be adjusted as costs go up. Income tax automatically generates more because people's incomes goes up. We don't have that same with fuel tax. We don't have that same automatic increase. It's a lose on that one. Tab fees go up because new cars get more expensive. So I understand those arguments. My argument has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the automaticness of this and the fact that the legislature will not be held accountable for raising taxes on individuals. And if the people want a tax increase, there should be no objection to having a standalone bill that comes through and says, this is the automatic thing, kind of like we have the revisers bill every year. Here's the automatic deal, boom, boom, it goes through the committee, hits the floor, and all 134 of us here and our colleagues down the aisle and the governor can all sign off on it, and the taxes and be moved, adjusted, and the people will know exactly when they comes ballot time. They'll know whether they believe they got their money's worth for that. So that's actually my comments there, and I'd still encourage a yes on this.
Thank you, Representative Barr. Is there any further discussion to the A4?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, could I request a roll call, please?
Sure thing. Roll call being requested. I do not see any other hands. Mr. Dodge, would you please take the roll?
Chair Cagle?
No.
Cagle, no. Representative Hornstein?
No.
Hornstein, nay. Representative Petersburg?
Yes.
Petersburg, aye. Representative Barr?
Aye.
Barr, aye. Representative Bernardi?
No.
Bernardi, nay. Representative Elkins?
Nay.
Elkins, nay. Representative Frederick? Representative Frederick? Representative Hausman?
No.
Hausman, nay. Representative Heinrich?
Aye.
Heinrich, aye. Representative Kosnick?
Kosnick, aye.
Kosnick, aye. Representative Mason?
No.
Mason, nay. Representative Murphy?
Murphy, no.
Murphy, nay. Representative Nelson?
Nelson, no.
Nelson, nay. Representative Olson?
Olson, aye.
Olson, aye. Representative Richardson?
No.
Richardson, nay. Representative Torkelson?
Aye.
Torkelson, aye. Representative West?
Aye.
West, aye. There are 7 ayes and 9 nays.
Representative Frederick votes no.
There are 7 ayes and 10 nays.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. The motion does not prevail. Next on the agenda is the A5 amendment. Representative Petersburg, did you want to offer this amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, I cannot offer it at this time. I have made a commitment that if I didn't get full agreement by everybody that I wouldn't do it. And I had high hopes last night that I might get information this morning, but I have not. So it's going to be one of those that I'm going to have to work out over the summer, and maybe we can deal with it next year. But at this time, I will not be offering it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right, then we have the A6. Representative Torkelson, did you want to offer the A6?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to offer the A6.
Thank you. Would you like to describe your amendment, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The A6 eliminates a provision in the bill that would extend the limitation on the number of CMGC contracts that the Department of Transportation can offer. That current limit is at 10. We haven't achieved that yet. We heard testimony yesterday from the general contractors that they are not in favor of this. They want more information, and so do I. We should have heard this in committee. This is a fairly new approach to construction contracts, one that seems to be working quite well, but does require needs review by this body, by this committee. We should get the perspective of those not only from the Department of Transportation, but from the contractors that are involved with this and other public testimony that might give us a better idea of just how well this is actually working for everyone involved, and whether or not it should continue or perhaps be tweaked in some way. For that reason, Madam Chair and members, I am recommending that we not extend that limit at this time. They still have a few more the contracts they can issue before they hit their current limit of 10. I think we need more evidence. We need more information. We should have discussed this in committee. And for that reason, I'm bringing forward this amendment, Madam Chair. And I would request a roll call on the amendment.
Thank you, Representative Torkelson. This was one of the provisions that was in one of my bills, and I have been working very hard with both the general contractors and MnDOT to try and find some sort of peace in the valley, which is our favorite term around here. Unfortunately, we weren't able to come to any agreement between the contractors and MnDOT. And so the original language did have the cap completely removed. Right now, the current cap is up at 10 projects, and MnDOT just recently reached their 8th project. And so there's only 2 projects left that they can use this process through. And I think, with the hopes of an infrastructure bill coming through at the federal level, we really wanted to make sure that there was enough projects available with this. And so I have vowed to both the contractors and MnDOT that I'd keep working on this issue. And so right now what we did is the language has the cap adding an additional 10 projects. And so I know nobody's really happy about it, but we were hoping that we could, come to some sort of middle ground. And I don't know if there's anybody from the public that would like to testify on this amendment, but I do see Representative Petersburg has his hand up. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. And I agree with the Representative Torkelson. We're at 8. We have 2 left. This is a policy issue that could be added to the transportation bill next year if they get to that 10th one. But I think it's important for us to get some more information from the department and from those that are working with this, contractors as well, to see how it is actually working and whether or not we are getting our best investment dollars that are done. If we add it from 10 to 20, we pretty much put them into automatic pilot through any new dollars that are coming forth. And if the program isn't working the way we want, we're not going to have an opportunity to change it. So I think it's appropriate for us to say, hey, let's hold off a year and let's deal with it next year if it's needed. And the department can come back with us to ask for that along with more information. So I would recommend a yes vote on this particular amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Torkelson, for raising this. I would recommend a no vote. I want to correct the record. This we did hear House File 1027, which was the governor's bill. It contained a number of policy provisions from MnDOT. So we had a hearing on this, but Vice Chair Cagle, I want to thank you. I mean, we wanted to be able to celebrate perhaps an agreement. I know you've been working hard going back and forth with the contractors, with MnDOT. We're not there yet. I'm confident still with your efforts, there is room for agreement. I hope we can, continue to move forward on this. But this is something that is very important, and we want to get it right. At this point, I'm comfortable with the number that's been agreed on, but there could be some room for movement. And I would like, Vice Chair Cagle, that you continue your efforts. But we do need to start to move this along. And I appreciated Ms. Ziegler's testimony yesterday. I hope that the department and the contractors will continue with Vice Chair Cagle's support and initiative to come to agreement. So again, I recommend a no vote on the Torkelson amendment.
Thank you, Chair Hornstein. Representative Torkelson, your hand is
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few closing comments. I did have a chance to review the department's interim report on this. They reviewed the 5 projects that are either complete or nearly complete. But again, their perspective is from that of the department. We need to hear from the contractors on this. I would hope that if you move forward this, that you would actually bring it to committee so that we can discuss at committee the ins and outs and pluses and minuses of this provision. I think doubling the number at this point in time is just not the responsible thing to do. And as Representative Petersburg said, this is a policy issue. There's no reason we couldn't take care of this in the second year of the biennium. It has no impact on the budget, no fiscal note. There's really no need to do this in a big hurry. With that, again, I renew my request for a yes vote on my amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Torkelson. Seeing no further discussion, and Representative Torkelson, you did call for a roll call, correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
Madam Chair, I
okay.
did.
Thank you. So Mr. Dodge, would you please take the roll?
Chair Cagle,
No.
Cagle, nay. Representative Hornstein,
No.
Hornstein, nay. Representative Petersburg,
Aye.
Petersburg, aye. Representative Barr,
Aye.
Barr, aye. Representative Bernardi,
Nay.
Bernardi, nay. Representative Elkins,
Elkins, nay.
Elkins, nay. Representative Frederick,
No.
Frederick, nay. Representative Hausman,
No.
Hausman, nay. Representative Heinrich,
Aye.
Heinrich, aye. Representative Kosnick,
Aye.
Kosnick, aye. Representative Mason,
No.
Mason, nay. Representative Murphy,
Murphy, no.
Murphy, nay. Representative Nelson,
Nelson, no.
Nelson, nay. Representative Olson,
Aye.
Olson, aye. Representative Richardson,
No.
Richardson, nay. Representative Torkelson,
Aye.
Torkelson, aye. Representative West, Representative West,
Representative West, your audio doesn't seem to be working.
Give a thumbs up.
West, aye. The 7 ayes and 10 nays.
The motion does not prevail. So next on the agenda, we have, again, Representative Torkelson, you have the A7 amendment. Would you like to move that amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to, yes, I'll move the amendment, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Can you please tell us about the A7 amendment?
Thank you. There's a project identified in this bill that's not a bad project, and I'm not presenting this amendment in order to try and criticize the validity of the project. It's a matter of process, Madam Chair and author. We have for a long time fought the battle of whether or not it's appropriate to earmark projects in the transportation bill. This doesn't actually fund the project, I realize, but it does earmark a project for study. And it gives me a chance to talk about this very important issue of earmarking. If we go forward with earmarking, we are opening the door for politicizing a process of selecting projects that really should not be politicized. Yet the problem is when you politicize it, you pick projects not based on the need or the appropriateness of the project. Instead, you pick projects based on whether or not it might politically benefit the party in power. And I think that's a big mistake. That's the last thing we should do. That's not the appropriate way for us to handle the project selection process. I do understand the need for some legislative input, and that's why I'm looking into possibly revising the Corridors of Commerce program in a way that allows for more substantial legislative input at the particular proper point in the process. But including this in this bill is not the proper approach to project selection, project identification. But because of the fact I don't want to put people in a position, members in a position where they would vote against it, projects need to get done. I'm going to withdraw this amendment this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. I just realized I was going to sneeze, so I muted myself and then forgot to unmute myself. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you very much. And Representative Torkelson, I want to thank you. You know, we have a very, very similar perspective on this. And I think it varies greatly from what we've seen lately in the Senate. If you look over at their bill, it's kind of an earmark-a-palooza, I think. I just made up a new word. There are just, it's project after project after project. And the problem is exactly what Representative Torkelson said, the problem with that process. And, you know, every once in a while, an issue comes up where, you know, I think that we had a couple of hearings I viewed as courtesies to each side at the end here. Representative Heinrich is a wonderful member of our committee, and he requested a specific project in Anoka County. And then I thought, well, we should have one from our side, and the one I chose was Representative Sandsted's. And in fact, we don't need the Heinrich project in our bill because that was resolved, although apparently it's still in the Senate bill. So someone should give Senator Abler a call. But, you know, so I was very moved by the hearing that we had on 169. I did not know that there were 3 deaths in a period of 4 months. And, you know, it's important that we're talking about people. I mean, you know, we had Michael Brandt died on that highway in December. And we had Larry Meyer from Hibbing was killed in January. And just 2 days before our hearing, Erica Lynn Wright was killed just this past March 24th on the same stretch of highway. And so I appreciate, Representative Torkelson, that you understand this. And you know, this is a important safety issue. And we can name, those of us who've been on this committee around transportation and state for a long time, we can name these corridors, right? Year after year after year, whether it's Highway 14, whether it's 23, whether it's 60, 169 always comes up as a highway where there's a lot of injuries and deaths. And in fact, I checked in a little with Representative Listlegard a few days ago just to see, well, do you have any issues around 169? And he said, hey, yes, we do have a dangerous intersection at Mountain Iron. And then I was just looking at looking over crash statistics yesterday. You know, DPS updates it on a daily basis, you know, where accidents take place and if there were injuries or fatalities. And in fact, just yesterday in Mountain Iron on 169, there was an accident with an injury. So I understand, Representative Torkelson, we are on the same page. And I have appreciated year after year after year, you're calling attention to earmarks. But I think on this one, you know, given the fact that we have had such compounding problems on this particular stretch of road, I was, I think, swayed by that very impactful hearing that this should be included. Even though, again, Representative Torkelson, I agree with you. I think we're going to have a lot of fights together as this session concludes, just to make sure we can keep these earmarks under control. I appreciate your raising this. I appreciate your bringing this up, and you know, it's an important issue, and I'm glad that we are in agreement.
Muted, Madam Chair.
Representative Torkelson?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a closing remark or two. Thank you, Representative Hornstein. You are correct, as is evidenced by the letter that I submitted. You do have a record being opposed to earmarks, as I do. I think that's an important stand to take. I would also note that many of the roads that you just mentioned in your remarks have actually been either have been fixed or are in line to be fixed, thanks to the Corridors of Commerce program, which you were active in initiating, and which I was active along with others in getting some funds to, and I'm hoping to revitalize as we move forward in this struggle to get roads repaired in Minnesota. It's important work, and it's my hope that at the end of this session, that the transportation bill that we finally vote on at the end of session is one that does do substantial work to move Minnesota forward in the area of transportation and transit. Thank you, Madam Chair and author.
Thank you, Representative Torkelson. So next up, we have the A8 amendment. Hopefully your audio is working, Representative West. Would you like to offer the A8 amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hopefully you can hear me, and I would like to move the A8 amendment before the committee.
Thank you. Can you please tell us about the A8?
Excellent. You can hear me. All right.
Yep.
So this is actually something Chair Hornstein and I think can find some agreement on. You know, I've co-authored a lot of bills related to the Met Council with Chair Hornstein in the past, and you know, none of them have become law, but we agree that the Met Council needs some help. And so looking at this bill where the Met Council has the ability to borrow a ton of money with no taxpayer oversight or really much of any oversight at all, because something we all share is the Met Council is not the most responsive to the will of the people. They are not really accountable to anyone except for the governor, and that has been a problem for quite some time. So my amendment makes it so if the council wants to bond for, you know, millions and millions of dollars, they have to put it to a referendum vote so that taxpayers have a say when, you know, millions of tax dollars are being spent, like when a school district does it. The voters should have a say, I think, as they should in the taxing district of the Met Council. And this is especially important considering how little oversight and accountability the Met Council currently has. So I think this amendment is something that in the realm of what our noble esteemed Chair Hornstein has pursued in the past with direct election of Met Council members themselves, which is something I co-authored with him. I think this is something that really makes sense, and I would highly encourage us to accept it today, and Madam Chair, to request a roll call as well.
Thank you. Roll call being requested. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How am I supposed to say no to that? No, I do say no to that. But Representative West, you know, you're spot on in terms of these accountability issues, and you know, I have sponsored elected Met Council bills, you know, almost every year since I've been here, every biennium. Sometimes they've been direct elections. Sometimes it's been a combination of appointments and county commissioners and local officials, what's known as a council of governments. So I'm glad that you raised this because, you know, I think we've also seen issues around many of members of both parties who sit on this committee, particularly in the metro area, have been contacted by their county commissioners regarding some language that, around capital improvements that they were concerned about. That I think that language is not in the bill. It won't be in our bill, and it sounds like it's been withdrawn. Actually, some call I got from the Met Council earlier this week. So, but to your point, and I think we're going to have a amendment later by Representative Koznick on sort of the idea of a referendum on sales tax. Yours relates to that too. And you may be surprised, Representative West, we have a lot of common ground on this one too. I prefer at this point that we have a sales tax, and of course the bonding issues that you raised in your amendment are related to that. But you know, at this point, I want to stick with what we've got in the bill, but I want to continue the conversation with you and Representative Koznick and others on our side of the aisle. It may come down to us wanting some kind of direct vote on at least the metro sales tax, you know, in the future. I don't propose it in this bill, but I have definitely had conversations with people about it, and I am not oppositional. But you know, for our purposes this year, I think we'll go with what we have in terms of shrinking the area of taxation and moving forward with that idea. But let's continue the conversation. I think, you know, on this question, maybe not to your specific piece, but the broader issue of the metro sales tax. You know, I'm open to conversations about a referendum, and we'll get into more of this in the Koznick amendment. But there are, you know, a diverse group of people that are starting to buzz about it. So thank you for bringing this forward, Representative West. Thank you for recognizing the need for reform of Metropolitan Council governance. And, you know, it's a policy year next year, and maybe next year is the year for the elected Met Council. And I would happily co-author that bill with you again.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this question is really about, as I was reviewing the bonding process, questions arose to me at least about what exactly revenue bonds were. And so I chatted with Mr. Lee, and I would like him to comment a little bit about it, because I'm not so sure that Met Council will even want to use these bonds. My understanding is that revenue bonds are based upon the revenue source of whatever they're bonded for. In this case, it would be sales tax. And so, and the language in the current bill as it is means nobody else is responsible for it except for the Met Council who's collecting the sales tax. And that the bonds, because that they are not fully sponsored and backed by the government, is going to have a higher interest rate and probably not generate as many dollars. That when you talk about the $300 million or so that this tax is going to raise, what level of bonding is available when you know that you have to reserve some of that in the future to pay off the debt service. And so if Mr. Lee would be willing to just briefly kind of talk us through what a revenue bond is and how it's applied, I think that might be helpful.
Mr. Lee.
Madam Chair and Representative Petersburg, certainly, revenue bond is a type of debt that either private or public entities can issue that tends to be tied to a specific asset or stream of revenue. In this particular case, in the DE2 amendment, the effective language for the authorization of a revenue bond based off of the proposed metropolitan area sales tax revenue can be found in Article 3, Section 10, which is on page 33 of the DE2 amendment, starting on 33.4. And so revenue bonds are slightly different from other types of debt that public entities issue, in that a revenue bond, as I said before, is tied to either a specific stream of revenue or a specific asset for that stream of revenue. In this case, the sales tax proceeds. In other cases, things like water rates for sewer or drinking water infrastructure, or parking rates for parking ramps. And it's different from other general obligation types of bonds where the full faith and credit of the unit of government is pledged as a payment stream to repay the debt. In some cases, and this is pulling from a memo from MMP, revenue bonds have the potential to have a higher interest rate depending on market conditions, because it doesn't have the full faith of taxing authority of the unit of government, but is rather a subset of revenues from either an asset or a specific revenue. So I hope that answers the question on revenue bonds.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. And maybe Mr. Lee can also, in an inquiry that I have is with the understanding of how much revenue can be generated through this sales tax, what do you see as just a ballpark figure? I know that there's variations. What would be the maximum ballpark that they could generate as a ceiling for bonds, which means then that once that bond level is reached, they can't really generate any more bonds for the remainder of the bond cycle. So what, Mr. Lee, do you have a ballpark figure of what that might be?
Mr. Lee.
Madam Chair and members, I don't have a ballpark figure for this specific proposal, but just in kind of talking through the sales tax estimate and some general parameters, it might be helpful for committee discussion or to answer the question. So the estimate for the revenue raised annually with the metro area sales tax in the DE2 amendment is about 266 million a year once fully phased in, meaning it's implemented not in half a fiscal year. And that ramps up to, and that's in fiscal 2023, and that ramps up to 271 million in fiscal 2025. That's the estimate from the Department of Revenue. It's kind of an apples and oranges comparison, but in estimates from MnDOT for trunk highway bonding capacity, the estimate is for annual debt service of a certain principal amount of debt. It's been roughly 1 to 10, and as that applies to the rate, so the lower interest rate. So that would mean that a $1 billion revenue stream would cost, or a $1 billion bond would have close to $100 million annual debt service obligation. I think that varies based off of the structure of bonds, whether or not they're 10, 20, 30-year bonds, and also what the interest rates in the market are at the time for that. But that's sort of a rough rule, or has been for GO debt, so for debt service.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. You know, that was kind of what as I was looking through the amount, as you can see, a $1 billion bond is going to take up half of each year's revenue source to pay it off, which means that it's probably not going to be as advantageous for the Met Council to utilize. It certainly would be in their toolbox, but I just am wondering whether or not that's a good revenue source for them for extending out some of these programs. But that's just food for thought. It's something that I had thought about to see whether or not, you know, what are revenue bonds and are they valuable in this particular case? And what are we really encumbering the whole area for, because these would tie up those dollars for whatever the length of the bond is, if it's 20 years or 30 years. So it's just food for thought. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg. Representative Koznick.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to voice my support for Representative West's amendment here and reiterate that, you know, I know it's a little bit more cumbersome to have a referendum to take out certain large bonds, but because of the fact that the Met Council does seem to be so unresponsive to the needs of the area, and the council members, you know, it's so staff driven, I think, and the Met Council takes on its own agenda in so many ways that the actual council members, I don't know that they even have the effect. So Representative Hornstein, we've talked in the past, and we should do some work next year on Met Council reform, and you know, maybe take a look and into it. That we had a good study group. I think the results were a little underwhelming, but it was a good effort, I suppose. But Representative West, thank you for offering this, because I think it does empower the taxpayers to have a more say, and especially in some of the more controversial projects that may be funded through this. And we'll get to the other amendment later, but the whole taxing district, you know, people in certain counties or parts of the district, whether it's Anoka County, Carver, Washington, and of course Dakota, aren't getting a fair shake in this. And we heard that from one of the commissioners yesterday, that absent having some kind of a guarantee, it doesn't make sense, and it benefits certain areas and not others. And I think that's what this amendment would more fairly address. So thank you, Representative West, and I think that's an important component that should be considered to help give voice to the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Koznick. Is there any further discussion to this, to the A8 amendment? Seeing not, oh, Representative West.
Well, just to wrap it up real quick. I appreciate the kind words, Chair Hornstein, as always. And this is something that I think is very necessary when spending, you know, millions of dollars of taxpayer money. But going forward, I mean, I'm assuming this amendment might have a little trouble here, but let's try and see what we can get done on the Met Council next year. It's something that we all have talked about for years and years. We've had committees talk about it and working groups and blue ribbon commissions. We need to get something done, because right now it's not really working for the majority of the whole district area. Like people up in my area absolutely hate the Met Council. The Anoka County has had plenty of issues with the Met Council. Cities in Anoka County have had very rough issues with the Anoka County. I mean, with the Met Council. And with like sewer access charges and all these things that are affecting people individually, people and businesses, we need to look at accountability for the Met Council, which is what I'm trying to do with this amendment. And hopefully we can get something done in the policy year next year, or at least really explore it and get something that maybe both parties can agree to that is fair to everyone. But thanks for the time, and please support my amendment.
Thank you. Seeing no other discussion to the amendment, Mr. Dodge, would you please take the roll?
Chair Cagle,
No.
Cagle, nay. Representative Hornstein,
No.
Hornstein, nay. Representative Petersburg,
Aye.
Petersburg, aye. Representative Barr,
Aye.
Barr, aye. Representative Bernardi,
Nay.
Bernardi, nay. Representative Elkins,
Elkins, no.
Elkins, nay. Representative Frederick,
No.
Frederick, nay. Representative Hausman,
No.
Hausman, nay. Representative Heinrich,
Heinrich, aye.
Heinrich, aye. Representative Kosnick, Kosnick, aye. Representative Mason,
Nay.
Mason, nay. Representative Murphy,
Murphy, no.
Murphy, nay. Representative Nelson,
Nelson, no.
Nelson, nay. Representative Olson,
Aye.
Olson, aye. Representative Richardson,
No.
Richardson, nay. Representative Torkelson,
Aye.
Torkelson, aye. Representative West,
Aye.
West, aye. There are 7 ayes and 10 nays.
The motion does not prevail. Next up is the A9. Representative Petersburg, did you want to offer this amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to. This refers to, this A9 amendment refers to the section of the bill in which we start converting over the Minnesota streetcar program into a transit program. And in essence of reviewing the language there, I see that one of the changes was that transit line includes also guideways. And guideways as defined in statute is this. It says guideway means a form of transportation service provided to the public on a regular and ongoing basis that primarily or substantially operates within separated rights of way or operates on rails, and includes intercity passenger rail, commuter rail, light rail transit, etc. And my concern when including that as part of the opportunity to use these funds that were collected for this purpose is that it really expands the role of what the dollars were originally collected for. How I read that portion of statute, it was for Minneapolis to look at how they can develop a streetcar program within their own community or within their own area for enhancement of tourism and other things, where this would expand it to where it could be used for light rail going through the system, etc. And so I think it's appropriate for us to just include busway as transit line for this particular area, rather than also including guideway. And so I'm hoping Mr. Chair will agree with that. But that is my intent, is that we really help keep the letter of the intent of the original statute to really keep it addressed for the purpose that I think it was originally intended. And so that's the bill, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg. Representative Hornstein?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Petersburg. Just to refresh the committee's memory, this was a bill that Representative Jordan had put forward. And I think that the legislation does move in the direction that you are preferring, Representative Petersburg. Right now, the history of this is the city of Minneapolis created a tax increment district, for the purposes of a streetcar. And Representative Jordan, in her testimony and in my conversations with her, and I'm also familiar with this area of Minneapolis, people are saying, look, they're looking at these very successful busways, these arterial bus rapid transit lines, And they feel that that should be an option. That should be a choice for them on the corridor where the streetcar is, has been planned. And so all we're doing in this legislation is expanding that choice. I think it's ultimately up to the city of Minneapolis, the communities that are impacted to, make a final choice. But for this legislation, they would not have the choice to have a busway or arterial bus rapid transit or a number of different bus options or non-streetcar options for that matter. So this is not. I think there was a implication that somehow this legislation is promoting rail transit. It's actually expanding the choice, and so I think we want to keep choices on the table, but add the choice of a busway for this local community. I think it really
see
does
what you're
come down to
saying.
local control, and
Oh,
so
that
we want to maintain that local control for Representative Jordan's district, and for that reason, Representative Petersburg, while I'm sympathetic to your interest in having a bus option here, I think that this language preserves, I think, what we like to do, both preserve local control and give people this additional bus option. Therefore, I would ask for a no vote.
Madam Chair.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you for that, and I will request a roll call, but in essence, Mr. Chair, you're actually making my point in that my amendment, it keeps in busway into the language. It just takes out guideways, which is more specific to intercity rail and other things, which is really outside of the scope of the original taxing district. So I would really support a positive vote because I think that keeps it in really what you said, giving the option of continuing on with additional busways, which my amendment does. So I would ask for a yes vote. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there any further discussion to the Petersburg A9 amendment? Seeing none, Mr. Dodge, will you please take the roll?
Chair Cagle,
No.
Cagle, nay. Representative Hornstein,
No.
Hornstein, nay. Representative Petersburg,
Aye.
Petersburg, aye. Representative Barr,
Aye.
Barr, aye. Representative Bernardi,
Nay.
Bernardi, nay. Representative Elkins,
Elkins, nay.
Elkins, nay. Representative Frederick,
nay.
Frederick, nay. Representative Hausman,
No.
Hausman, nay. Representative Heinrich,
Heinrich, aye.
Heinrich, aye. Representative Kosnick,
Aye.
Kosnick, aye. Representative Mason,
Nay.
Mason, nay. Representative Murphy, Representative Murphy, Representative Nelson,
Nelson, nay.
Nelson, nay. Representative Olson,
Aye.
Olson, aye. Representative Richardson,
No.
Richardson, nay. Representative Torkelson,
Aye.
Torkelson, aye. Representative West,
West, aye.
West, aye. Representative Murphy,
Murphy, no. Sorry.
Murphy, nay. Murphy, nay. There are 7 ayes and 10 nays.
The motion does not prevail. That was the A9. Are we on the A10 now?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, Representative Petersburg, would you like to offer the A10 amendment?
I will offer it for discussion at this point. It is very similar to the A4, and so we don't need to go into a lot of discussion. But one of the things that I think we need to keep in mind is that whenever we put things on autopilot, we take away not only the discretion, but the responsibility of the legislature to do the job that it was elected to do. And that's a concern that I think we have. And we got to stop relinquishing our responsibility as elected officials. Otherwise, we could just elect everybody and not do anything because everything's on autopilot. And I think it's important for a couple other reasons, is that once you put it in autopilot, you oftentimes can get yourself into this competitive disadvantage with surrounding states when you don't compare how you're doing with other states as well, especially neighboring states when already I'm getting calls from local border town filling stations in which they're not being competitive with other communities in across the state lines. The other direction, the other issue that it has is that when you put things on autopilot, there's kind of an assumption that that autopilot will automatically take care of the future needs. And sometimes we don't know that. Sometimes things grow faster than that autopilot, or sometimes slower. And we need to always be willing to discuss that. If we don't, how do we get into improvements? How do we make changes? Because I will tell you that all of us, and it's companies are true, agencies are true, we don't change if everything is status quo and there's no need to. Change almost always comes from our need to change because of some sort of uncomfortability or some sort of traumatic issue that we're having to deal with. I know that we have need for additional funding to deal with some of this maintenance issues, but in the 9 years now that I've been in legislature, we've talked about the future needs and how 10 years from now the roads are going to be such and such, and we've done things to improve them. And you know what? Each year, some things get better, some things stay the same. It is always going to be that way. We are always going to have more want than what we have for funding, and so we need to continually keep that in mind and discuss it and negotiate it. We need to hold agencies accountable for improvements, and we don't do that when everything is in autopilot. And so that's a concern I have with it. My bill took out the indexing of tax, so did A4. Mine also eliminated the luxury surcharge, which has already been taken care of in a previous amendment. And so it's no, and we had a voice roll call on it already. So we don't need to do that again. So I'm going to withdraw the amendment, but I just wanted to at least to just have us discuss the idea that automatic inflators, where it helps, we don't have to make that discussion later. That's not what we were really elected to do. And I think we need to continually always push us to make these tough decisions. And we need to do it bipartisanly wise. Absolutely. I agree with Mr. Chair on that. But we also have to do it with the difficult discussions that are required. So thank you, Madam Chair. I will withdraw this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg. Chair Hornstein, did you want to add anything? Or
I mean, I'll keep my comments brief on this. Thank you, Representative Petersburg. We'll have maybe some more discussion later, but it seems like we're getting a lot of "we need funding, but," right? And then what is the but? There was objection to any gas tax increase. So on the other side of the aisle, and so I thought, well, let's see if we can move forward in another path, which is indexing. And so now it's, well, a penny a year, that we can't accept that. That's government on autopilot. Well, members, the only thing that is on autopilot right now is our rapidly deteriorating infrastructure. And I don't accept the fact that, well, it's always going to be bad. It's going to go back and forth. We heard from Commissioner Anderson Kelleher on 2 different times. She showed us a graph that had a number of colors. And we are in a danger zone by 2030, and we're in a very cautious zone now. We cannot continue to persist with a 60 and 70 at times year old infrastructure. And so, we're doing our best to understand and acknowledge the concerns of the other side of the aisle. And that's why we don't have, again, whenever we propose a gas tax, well, the economy is bad, we can't do it. Oh, the economy is good, we can't do it. So I'm searching for something that we can work on here. And so to simply, indexing will provide some funding, not nearly enough. Ms. Donahoe testified to that yesterday, and I agree with her. But it's something, it gets us going, it helps us access federal money. It's 1 penny. And I again, almost half the country is doing it. And it is providing necessary, needed, urgent funding. And so we can talk about it, as we move forward with this bill, but I don't see anything onerous or problematic in doing this. The only problem is that this is important new funding, but we need more. It doesn't go far enough, but it gets us a start. And all we're asking for is an inflationary adjustment. That's all this is. And I'm just disappointed that it seems like any proposal that involves new revenue, not a shift of general fund money, but anything that involves new revenue, seems like people are going to find reasons to not do it. And I find this a reasonable and practical approach. And we'll talk about it as we move forward. But I do appreciate your comments and hearing your perspective, Representative Petersburg.
And I do want to remind the committee that this is an amendment that's been withdrawn. And so we're not going to be voting on it. Representative Petersburg, if you'd want to.
Yeah, thank you. And I just would say with all due respect, Mr. Chair, it's difficult for us to vet out this when it comes at the last minute. And yes, we've had discussion in other years, but to have 15 minutes when you're putting together the bill with something that's new, that's not necessarily appropriate, I don't think. And because maybe there are other ideas and stuff that we could have had under further discussion as well. And so I don't have a problem with working on additional revenue, looking at different things too. But my concern is that once you put on autopilot, you take all of that out of the discussion, and that's the concern. And so, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, I just don't think that's. It is really more about the details of how long we've had to really discuss it. And I know you didn't want to get into a lengthy discussion, so I'm going to just drop it at that point. Thank you.
Well, Madam Chair.
Representative Hornstein.
I appreciate that, Representative Petersburg, and we'll not. I'm done with indexing, but I did want, in responding to that, but I did want, since you raised some process issues and those were raised yesterday, I think, it may or may not come up again, but I wanted to just address that. Representative Koznick had some issues that he hinted at with process. You've now raised it again. We have set aside 9 hours this week to go over this bill. It was posted in plenty of time for amendments. We are having extensive discussion today about amendments, about policies. We're hearing your ideas. We heard from the public yesterday. We spent 3 hours going through the bill on Tuesday. This is how normally it's done. I understand that, there might have been, if we had put some of these finance proposals earlier, we wouldn't even have accurate data to work with. We didn't have a revenue note. We worked hard to get the revenue note so we can have it in our committee for this week's discussion. It may have not been even ready for the tax bill. So I just want to say, members, that we are following a good process here. It's never perfect in the legislature. It's not, certainly we have challenges in a pandemic. But we are having a good discussion this week. Representative Petersburg, I hope we can continue the tradition of having the ranking member present ideas. You presented ideas. We can get into that a little bit later. I didn't think the revenue was at all what we need. But, I appreciate your concern. I'm sensitive to process, and I've learned a few things through this, putting this bill together. But I want to say, for the record, we are hearing from the public this week. We are hearing from the majority and the minority, and let's continue the conversation.
Thank you, Representative Hornstein. Representative Mason, do you have a quick comment? I think we're ready to move on to the next amendment.
And that's true, but we've talked about the indexing several times. And I just want to make it really clear that during my first term in the legislature, we passed a gas tax, which had not been raised in over 20 years. We have not done that since. And I remember the last time we raised the minimum wage, it was a huge amount, and my Republican counterparts thought it was huge. But again, it hadn't been raised in decades and decades. So the problem is, if you have people that just are not willing to move forward, it places us in a real untenable deal. And I've been, as a council member, I was always conscious of MnDOT being 20 years behind in its projects. So and this is like 20 years later, we still haven't resolved MnDOT's financial issues. So again, we need to find something different and find it quickly, but we need to do something. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Mason. Last comment on this topic, and then we'll move on to the A11. Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the author. Thank you to Representative Petersburg for addressing this very important issue of revenue. My problem with this is that somehow holding up the gas tax as being the best way forward for raising revenue for transportation is in many ways a false argument, because we all know that cars are getting more efficient, that we have many more electric vehicles on the horizon. Gas tax, I realize, is a substantial portion of revenue for the Department of Transportation, but it's not the only potential source. And the general fund. We have a $1.6 billion surplus. We commit only a tiny fraction of that to transportation. And thank goodness we do, but there's no reason we couldn't expand on that. Transportation is vital to every aspect of Minnesota's economy. The general fund support of transportation is entirely appropriate in my mind and in the mind of many others. Gas tax is in many ways a regressive tax. It hurts those that can afford it least the most. And I strongly support Representative Petersburg's initiative to reduce dependence on the gas tax. And with that, Madam Chair, I could go on for quite some time, but in the interest of time and in accordance with the fact that this amendment has been withdrawn, I'll drop out at this point. But again, I'll just reiterate how important it is that we have a substantial transportation bill at the end of the year or end of the session, and that we are in a significant part of the budget negotiations, not an afterthought. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Torkelson. All right, next up we have the A11 Amendment. Representative Barr, did you want to offer this amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to move the A11, please.
Thank you. Tell us about the A11, please.
Madam Chair, Representative Hornstein, members of the committee, the A11 ends the funding of the Northstar Light Rail and directs MnDOT to sell off all the assets. So we've been talking about not having enough money, and we're always finding these shortfalls. And this is a project that costs the taxpayer about $12 million a year that could very easily be moved back into BRT, regular buses, potholes, any myriad of ways that MnDOT could find to spend $12 million every year. And the ridership on this is down 96% from last year. So it's just a really good time to pull the plug on this boondoggle.
Representative Chair Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Barr. And I would ask for a no vote here. And just two quick responses. Number one, this isn't the time to make huge decisions about, whether or not this line should continue. You are correct, Representative Barr, that there's a significant dip in ridership. That's due to the pandemic. Some people argue, well, the ridership isn't great otherwise, but you know why that is? It's because it is actually been improving. But the issue is that this train should have gone to St. Cloud from the beginning, and we should have a little bit more regular service on it. People will take transit if it gets to where they want to go, and if it gets to where they want to go at the proper time. So the other piece is that it's going to cost the taxpayer $83 million if we were to approve the Barr amendment. That is the cost to simply breaking the different commitments that are in law that relate to this line. So I would counsel patience. We are hopefully getting out of this pandemic. I believe that from the experts that I have seen, that transit ridership will come back. It will not come back overnight. And let's then do what this legislature agreed to do in 2019, which is study moving this line up to St. Cloud, which I do believe is going to be helpful. So again, this is not the right time to do this. And it's going to be very, very costly to pull the plug on this right now. $83 million. Members, please vote no.
Thank you, Representative Hornstein. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and maybe to Representative Barr, the author here. I am concerned about that $83 million, and I think there is an option in which you could request a variance or forgiveness of that from the federal government, but I don't see that in this amendment, and I guess I would be careful to support this amendment without that provision in it. Otherwise, we are really talking about it. But I support the idea that Northstar has had enough time trying to figure out whether or not it's effective, and even going up to St. Cloud, and we would get the ridership back to where it was. The subsidy was still quite significant for the value there, and so I don't know where to go with it. But I do have some concerns with this bill without some sort of rider provision that it proceed only if we can get the federal government to forgive that $83 million, because that is a big chunk as well. That's just my 2 cents worth. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg. Representative Barr.
If Representative closing comments, so if
Okay.
everybody else goes.
Sure. Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Barr. Appreciate your support of my initiative to forward this discussion, but I think it's a serious discussion that is included in the other body's bill. It's been introduced here. I believe it'll be introduced. My companion bill will be introduced shortly, if not already. If the argument is that this thing should have been brought out to St. Cloud, and those arguments just kind of don't hold true when you look at an analysis that was done in 2019. The ridership that was expected on the current line in the first year, 12 years later, has never been met. Ridership has never approached the 1-year target of 100,000 riders. It was starting to get close, but even in 2018, before the pandemic, there was a dip in ridership as a percentage, almost a whole percent back then. And so I think we have enough data that this line isn't working, and we have to, as I've said, reimagine and reinvent how we handle our commuter and transit needs. In the post-pandemic world, we know from experts that more people are going to be more businesses are comfortable having their employees work at home, and that will require less commuter traffic. I'm proud that in my district, Lakeville, we had the express line going into downtown Minneapolis, and that was one of the highest fare box recoveries in the whole system. But I'm realistic that those patterns are going to change as well when we do get back, and unfortunately, it's not going to be create as much revenue as it has in the past. But we need to look at, and what I think this discussion leads to is, as a committee, and this bill overall, I don't think recognizes that we do need to take a look at the different commuter patterns across the spectrum of busing, light rail, adding more passenger rail. We had a couple of bills for that. And certainly, I think this experience with Northstar indicates that those are not where we need to add our responsibilities to in the transportation system. It was mentioned that if you provide the transportation, people will ride it, and the scheduling and stuff. Well, the people in St. Cloud, they have the Catch the Link. There's a bus that goes from St. Cloud, connects them to the Northstar passenger rail, and that's pretty underwhelming as well. Looks like 97 of the 34 average weekday boardings in 2018, only a quarter of those were out of the St. Cloud area. So we provided even a bus to get there, and it sounds really romantic to have a bus come to your town. Maybe it puts you on the map a little bit more, a little prestigious. But we, as a committee, have to make the financial and do the research, whether it is in fact a strong commitment to the needs. And I would argue that the ridership here, even before the pandemic, has shown that it doesn't work. And then the argument about building it farther out to get more riders, that's probably $300 million more dollars to build that out, and will elevate the probably double or triple the operating cost. And so it just doesn't make sense to continue to even almost have that argument. But there is data on there. So I appreciate Representative Barr doing this. I'm not going to vote for your amendment because it doesn't recognize the $85 million obligation to the federal operating cost that would be incurred to this. That's a mistake to not have that in there, but we'll probably talk about this more at a later point, certainly during conference committee and hopefully on the House floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Koznick. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as I've been listening to the discussion and this current discussion on this, the issue of subsidies keeps getting brought up about we're subsidizing the public transit, we're subsidizing transit. We also subsidize our roads just as much as we subsidize transit. There's a little lie that people think that we pay for our roads with our gas tax and that it covers everything, all the costs that are involved in that. That is not true. And so when we propagate that lie that we subsidize transit but not the roads, it gives people the false idea that our roads are being paid for and our roads are free and public transportation is not. So members, that's the only thing I want to say. It just irks me every time we hear that. I've been hearing that for 20 years in the legislature from the other side of the aisle and people that don't want to fund public transit the way it needs to be funded. And so that's my comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. Representative Koznick, your hand is still up. Thanks. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. And if I could just ask a question of Representative Nelson. He indicates that we are subsidizing roads and bridges, and I think that is true in townships. But can you? I'm unfamiliar, unclear about what subsidy goes to our trunk highway system.
Representative Nelson.
Madam Chair and Representative Petersburg, we subsidize our roads with our property taxes for the local roads, for the county roads, the county system, for our metros, for our city system, the individual cities. We have to subsidize them. They're not just paid for with the gas tax. They're also subsidized by our local property taxes for the people that live in those cities and for people that may not even drive on those roads. So members, it's not just public transit that gets subsidized. We've always underfunded this system. It's never been built out enough where it can be a dependable system that people can rely on it to get to work, to get to their doctor's appointments, to get to their grocery stores. So therefore, we have to build more roads and people have to get cars, and that's a very expensive thing that people have to have. You have to have a car to get to a job. If you can't afford to buy a car and the job is not on a bus line, you can't get to that job, which means you can't get to work. So members, we do subsidize our system with our property taxes in the cities, our property taxes to the county, and our property taxes to the state.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, but you didn't really answer my question. My question was about the trunk highway system, which handles about 60 to 80% of the traffic. Yes, local roads that are also built by local dollars et cetera, are subsidized because that's under the local jurisdiction. But here we're talking about state dollars that have a responsibility that we have for those funds. And I don't think that those are subsidized. I'm sure it may be semantics, but the point is that this is really about the fact that those that are driving on the roads and are paying the taxes are subsidizing through their sales tax, their vehicles, additional dollars that are not roads and bridges, but are really in transit. And so there's going to be a debate here, and we could get into it now, but that's not the time to do so because we, again, haven't had enough time to really discuss the whole thing. But I hear that all the time also that, well, no, everything gets subsidized by local taxpayer dollars and local property taxes, but that's not true, trunk highways. And so, and that's where a bulk of the dollars go, so.
Madam Chair.
I don't know if this is the proper time to be having a back and forth debate. I think we can speak to the merits of the amendment. And I see a couple other hands up as well. So Representative Elkins.
Yeah, just to the point that, you know, Chair Nelson is trying to make, if you look at all levels of roads in the state, the property taxes that we pay to support city streets and county roads are even larger than the amount that we pay in state gas taxes for state trunk highways. And that disparity grows every year because as long as the state gas tax is frozen, the share that goes to cities and counties is frozen as well, and is in fact shrinking, which just every year increases the burden on local property taxpayers to maintain streets and roads, including their local match share of improvements to state trunk highways.
Thank you. So to the A11 Amendment, Representative Koznick.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. And just briefly to the discussion and debate with Representative Nelson and Petersburg brought up. And I think Representative Nelson brings up a fair point that, yes, other modes of transportation do have a subsidy, and I recognize that. I don't think anybody in this committee doesn't. The roads that we use also carry commerce, which enable more revenue to be generated. Unfortunately, on the light rail or the passenger rail, they're not continuing to, they don't have the same commercial effect. And so I think that's important consideration. But also should be noted that, you know, Northstar, the reason this is being pointed out is that Northstar continues to have an operating subsidy of between $12 and $14 million a year. And its fare box recovery is 16.5% roughly. But comparing that to the average US commuter rail line of about 40%, that should be the difference. And the critical point that we need to understand in that debate is that, yes, we understand that these different modes of transportation are subsidized in other taxes or other fees, but this particular line is really underperforming, especially among its peers. It ranked 21 out of 25 lines on fare recovery. And so that's why this is being brought up, and I appreciate the support of Representative Barr and others, and we'll continue to have this discussion, but I think that's an important part to recognize. Not that it has a subsidy, but the subsidy is so large because the line is failing so bad, is what we need to remember.
Thank you, Representative Koznick. And I would also probably state that, you know, the transit system carries human capital. And a lot of these products and goods would not be able to get to market without the workers that do that. And so we need to make sure that these workers have an opportunity and a chance to get to their jobs. And so we can't forget that, you know, these are people, and people use these modes of transportation. And so I want to make sure to raise that issue. So I don't see any further discussion to the amendment. So we're going to move to a vote on the A11 Amendment.
Madam Chair?
Madam Chair, closing comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Barr. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to address a couple of points here. The fare box recovery is one. So there's nothing in this amendment that would preclude MnDOT from asking for forgiveness of the federal obligation on this. And if we're gonna, even if it costs us 83, 85 million dollars and we're losing somewhere around $12 million a year, that's only 7 years and you've cut your losses. It's estimated to cost about 300 million to continue the line up to St. Cloud. Continuing to St. Cloud creates another problem because those aren't our rails. We're leasing track time from Burlington Northern. So to increase the number of trains or to increase the length out to St. Cloud, that contract would have to be renegotiated, which may or may not happen. There's nothing that would say Burlington Northern has to give us track time. So there's quite a few pieces in here this has been a really good discussion. I appreciated it. I know this is not going to fly today, and I am the discussion needs to keep going. And as far as the property tax, funding roads and everything, that's a completely separate topic, discussion, and one that needs to be addressed, kind of whose road, who should pay for it kind of thing. And I would enjoy having that conversation at a later date, because I think it's a very interesting one, how we pay for all of the different modes of transit that people use, whether it's building the road or the providing the bus or the light rail or a bicycle path, all of the different modes that people use. How that should all be paid for, and that is a separate and very interesting discussion. So with that, Madam Chair, I conclude my comments.
I'm sorry, what was the last little bit?
I conclude my comments. Go ahead and vote.
Thank you, Representative Barr. Representative Hornstein, did you want to add anything, or can we move to a vote here real quick?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Let's move to a vote. I do believe that it's been a great conversation, a lot of different topics, and I think it's really important for the committee to have this kind of free exchange of ideas back and forth. And I appreciated the discussion, and I return to my original request of the committee to vote no on the amendment.
All right, so with no further discussion, all those in favor of the A11, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay.
No.
The motion does not prevail. Representative Barr, you're up again with the A12. Would you like to offer that amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to offer the A12, please.
Go ahead and explain your amendment.
This, hopefully I found something that works for the committee today. I think I'm a little softer ground here. So during our discussion about the Rondo neighborhood being destroyed or having a big chunk taken right out of the middle of it, the one piece that I noticed was never brought up was eminent when they wanted the bridge built over there to reconnect the neighborhood. There was no discussion in there about how would you prevent this from happening in the future. So this bill or this amendment amends the eminent domain portion to say if MnDOT is going to condemn more than 15 houses to build a road, that condemnation is going to have to come to the legislature for a vote. So they can't just go ahead and destroy a neighborhood and basically do what they did to Rondo will prevent that from happening in another community. This is just an eminent domain reform, and it only applies to MnDOT.
Thank you. Representative Hornstein?
Thank you, Representative Barr. And, I've been in conversation with MnDOT to try to understand this a little bit better. And, it's really important. I don't think that this particular, what MnDOT does with eminent domain is at all analogous to the destruction of the Rondo neighborhood. But, this applies mainly to land. In terms of what MnDOT does. And, I think that, we want to, this provision is something that we have routinely in omnibus bills on both sides of the aisle when we've had both Republican and Democratic leadership of this committee. There's concern that, this could also, these are parcels of land. A number of the current parcels relate to Highway 14 and some of the ongoing construction there. This could delay that construction. It could add costs. So this is a matter that is, again, not analogous to the situation we spoke about earlier. And, in the interests of costs and making projects like Highway 14 move along faster, I would oppose this amendment.
Thank you. Is there any discussion to the A12 amendment? I see that Ms. Witt from MnDOT would like to comment. Go ahead. Then after that, Representative Koznick, I will ask that you just follow Ms. Witt. I am going to run to the bathroom real quick.
Thank
Ms.
you,
Witt.
members, Chair and committee members. My name is Jennifer Witt, and I am with MnDOT's Office of Government Affairs. And so this amendment is a little concerning to MnDOT. First, this language could delay a project for several years. A project could then be subject to increases in inflation, which not only impacts MnDOT, but the local cost share as well. Construction inflation varies, as you know, and we have seen 10 to 12% increases in recent years. So it would be probably very significant in the cost area. To get a law for the project that has more than 15 parcels needed, we could see a minimum or, well, at least a year, but our estimate is that it could probably take 2 years at least. The language of the amendment also jeopardized project funding. Many projects are funded by bonds and grants, and these have deadlines to use that funding. A project is delayed several years trying to get a bill passed to allow us to, acquire more than 15 parcels. We risk losing that project funding. The language makes about 30% of our projects let in a fiscal year, and that's very significant to us. This amendment also makes it hard for us to manage our overall project. We don't know if a bill could pass, and so we would need to have contingency plans in place to spend the money in other areas if we were not able to get a bill passed that year. We could, if a landowner is unwilling to sell or negotiate a reasonable price, we may have no choice but to cancel a project. We can't use eminent domain. The right-of-way acquisition process is often on our critical path to start construction, meaning we can't begin until that process is complete. So adding a step to pass a law to allow more than 15 parcels will delay projects. Lastly, I just want to share a couple of examples of numbers, of the kinds of numbers we're talking about. So for Highway 14, which has often been debated in this committee in the past, here's the breakdown of some needed parcels for each of those legs. For the Cortland bypass, it was 119 parcels. For the Nicollet to North Mankato leg, that was 46. And for the Nicollet bypass portion, that was 19. So again, this is very significant to us. So that's all I have. And I'm here to answer questions, as is our Director of Land Management, if you want to discuss it further. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Witt. And I think there's Mr. Shetland would also like to testify to this amendment. Is that okay if he goes before you, Representative Koznick?
Well, that was a little bit to my question. So maybe I'll just make some comments, and I would appreciate to hear his concerns or support, I guess. But I appreciate the comments from the department, Ms. Witt, and my concern was, or questioning was, maybe for the author or either the departments that my counsel could talk about. Representative Barr, you had stated that it applies only to MnDOT, but I just wanted clarification that this would not affect maybe some of our BRT planning that we have, the arterial bus routes that would be on the schedule, because I do recognize it's not just roads and bridges. We do have a full transportation, a multi-mode system to be efficient. And so I want to make sure that's not affected either. Not that I necessarily approve or endorse every single line that we're doing, but I think it's important consideration. I like where the amendment is intended to go, but I think there might need some refining a little bit. So I'd like to hear what the Met Council or the author has to say about some of those other comments I made.
Mr. Shetland, welcome to the committee. If you could state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and members, and thanks Representative Koznick for the question. And it was mentioned earlier that that this amendment only impacts MnDOT, and I believe that there are some pretty significant impacts to the council as well, because it does state that the council cannot use this eminent domain authority. And so unless I'm understanding that differently, I'd like to make just a couple comments about that, which I believe will cover what Representative Koznick's question was about. We believe that the language will negatively impact future transitway projects because we do use eminent domain as part of how we build our transitways. And the amendment, as we understand it, would apply to any taking, which in our case, it would apply to acquiring parcels, temporary easements, or permanent easements. And that would affect nearly every future LRT or BRT project, including arterial BRT projects. And BRT in particular, to Representative Koznick's question, they have many small and typically temporary impacts to reconstruct sidewalks and to make accessibility improvements near stations. And those projects and easements are usually near small city parcels and lead to a number of very small acquisitions for the project. So arterial BR projects, BRT projects, and LRT projects would be included. And if this language were to be adopted and become law, it would require us to have specific legislation passed to allow us to use condemnations for any of these projects. We think that will cause a delay. If legislation wasn't passed, it could stop a project. And, you know, our projects, we believe, are important for a regional purpose. And if we're talking about specific projects and big LRT projects, you know, we have to go through the process of municipal consent with communities as well. And so we do have major concerns about this, and we would strongly oppose it. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Shetland. Any follow-up questions? Not seeing any hands raised. Representative Barr, did you want to make any closing comments?
Yes, Madam Chair. Yeah, and to Representative Shetland, yes, this does include the Met Council, and if it needs a little refining here, I'm more than happy to do a little refining between here and the floor. This is intended to if somebody had to lose their home as opposed to taking a little easement access. Every home I've ever had is always the utilities have easements. There's different easements along the right of way, the road, the ditch. You know, there's always easement stuff, and that doesn't affect whether I can live in my home or not. So yes, I can do a little refining on this and have this brought back for the floor debates where it'd be taking someone's home. And if you're going to take someone's home away, yeah, I don't think it should be an extremely easy process. And I did have a question. I don't know if that's appropriate for Ms. Witt, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Madam Chair, Ms. Witt, could you tell me, you listed off 3 projects there and all of the parcels that you bought. How many of those did you outright buy, and how many did MnDOT acquire through the use of eminent domain?
Ms. Witt.
Representative Barr, I'm going to turn this over to I'm going to use my lifeline and ask Director Jill to step up.
Welcome to the committee. If you could please state your name for the record and answer the question, please.
Madam Chair, Joe Pignato, I'm the Director of Land Management for MnDOT. Representative Barr, on average, we are acquiring about 91% of our parcels through direct negotiations, and we're doing about 9% of our parcels through condemnation. So on those projects specifically, let me see if I have that in front of me. I think I did. You know, I don't have that number in front of me. I would have to take a look at that and get back to you on that. But I think these all came in at about that percentage.
Thank you. Representative Barr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if, I'm just doing this from memory, I did not jot the numbers down when Ms. Witt read them off, but the biggest one was 117, I believe, parcels on the Highway 14 project, and 91%, so just use some round math, that's 10%, 10% of 117 parcels, that's 11, that's less than 15. So it still would not apply. This would not apply to that. The 17 or 18 parcels on the little one that you went around, that would just, the simple math would put it down to somewhere around 1 or 2 parcels that you would have had to use through eminent domain. And so this still would not apply. And I still am more than happy to negotiate this a little bit more as far as like making it closer to dwellings, but where people reside. But taking somebody's property away is a pretty serious thing, and I don't think it should be something that we've multiple times during this committee we've talked about. We need to do things for the people to make sure they can get to work and provide this and provide this and provide this. And if we're the one thing that keeps a people free is their ability to own property. And when the state can come take the property away because they want it for another reason, the people aren't really free at that point. They're just kind of, property tax, we're paying alms to rent our land from the government because it can be taken away at any time. So this whole property ownership, that's another one of these big ideas or big subjects that needs to be addressed. And the intent of this amendment is to prevent another Rondo from happening, because there was a lot more than 15 dwellings that were moved, destroyed, condemned during the putting the freeway from Minneapolis to St. Paul when they built I-94 through the town there. So that's the intent of the amendment. And if it needs a little tweaking here, I'm more than happy to work with you guys to get this done, but to dial it into maybe just households or habitable houses or something like that. But yeah, the whole idea of the government being able to take somebody's land because they want it for another purpose is a little repugnant to me.
Representative Barr, would you like to withdraw the amendment and continue working on it, or did you want to take a vote?
No, Madam Chair, I'd kind of like to take a roll call vote just to kind of see where I'm at and gauge what I need to do between now and floor.
Okay. Is there any further discussion to the bill, Representative Hornstein, or to the amendment, Representative Hornstein?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate the discussion. I thought that the testimony from MnDOT was very compelling, and again, we want to make sure that these projects move forward. And again, this is land conveyance on priority projects like Highway 14. And so with that, I would suggest a no vote, ask for no vote on this amendment.
With a roll call being requested, Mr. Dodge, would you please take the roll?
Chair Cagle?
No.
Cagle, nay. Representative Hornstein?
No.
Hornstein, nay. Representative Petersburg?
No.
Petersburg, nay. Representative Barr?
Aye.
Barr, aye. Representative Bernardi?
Nay.
Bernardi, nay. Representative Elkins?
No.
Elkins, nay. Representative Frederick?
Oh, wait, Mr.
Wait
Dodge.
a second, Jeff. You said I.
Yeah, you skipped me.
He said Representative Nelson voted in Elkin's spot, so.
I thought he said Nelson.
Excuse me.
No,
No,
Representative Elkins.
Yeah, Elkins.
Yeah,
nay.
Representative Elkins, nay. Representative Frederick?
Nay.
Frederick, nay. Representative Hausman?
No.
Hausman, nay. Representative Heinrich?
Aye.
Heinrich, aye. Representative Kosnick?
No.
Kosnick, nay. Representative Mason?
No.
Mason, nay. Representative Murphy?
Murphy, no.
Murphy, nay. Representative Nelson?
Nelson, no.
Nelson, nay. Representative Olson?
No.
Olson, nay. Representative Richardson?
No.
Richardson, nay. Representative Torkelson?
No.
Torkelson, nay. Representative West?
No.
West, nay. There are 2 ayes and 15 nays.
And with that, the motion does not prevail. So now we are on to the A15 amendment. Representative Koznick, did you want to offer that amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do offer and would move the A15 amendment. The amendment would require that the counties for the transit district that are in the bill, the counties would be required to have a local vote to a referendum to be in that taxing district. But then also would allow all counties across the state, because we have needs across the state, is what we continue to keep hearing. And so it would allow all counties across this, or require all counties across the state to also have a referendum in the affirmative to increase their sales tax.
Thank you. Representative Hornstein, did you want to comment on the amendment?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Representative Koznick. And as I mentioned to Representative West, some ideas that I have started discussing with others, well, I mean, there's really 2 parts. So let me address the first part and then the second part, Representative Koznick. The first part is the Metro, the referendum for a sales tax for transit. I do think that down the road, this may be a solution to move us forward. I am not at all, I'm not hostile to it. And we'll have to see, Representative Koznick, where things head this year. And like I said to Representative West, it seems like there's some energy around electing the Met Council.
This is Mary Murphy.
Some of the accountability issues that
I'm fine.
he raised. And Representative Koznick, I'll tell you, I think there's some energy around potentially a referendum, but that has to be thought through very carefully. The question that would appear on the ballot has to be thought through very carefully. The amount of support and electoral organizing around something like this is significant. But I am really, I want to thank you, first of all, because I think this actually is an important step that you are suggesting. I think referenda, may have been discussed in passing, but I think this is one of the more serious proposals that I have seen. And I would like to continue the conversation. For the purposes of our bill, I would like to take another run at the imposition of the tax. I would like to see if we can get a little bit more buy-in to the idea of the transit, the areas that use the transit, paying for the transit via the taxing district, that they would be those that would be paying the sales tax. Businesses in those areas and residents of those areas. To your second part of your amendment, I find it intriguing as well, but it's also very similar to what we have in place already. There is in 2013 in the Omnibus Transportation Bill, we were able to get across the finish line a local option sales tax for any county in the state that chooses to use it. We've had many counties, including some of our most populous counties outside of the metro area, utilize that local option sales tax. And so that's working well. And if it's not broke, I don't see a reason to fix it. But your idea, I think, is sound. It's already in law, and I don't feel, or at least a version of your idea, let's put it that way, is in law, and I don't find the need to change it. But Representative Koznick, I think on this and a couple of other issues you've raised today, let's continue the conversation. I think it's it may be something down the line that that can move us forward and perhaps bring a few people together that haven't really been on the same page on this. So thank you for bringing it forward, but I will have to oppose it.
Any further discussion to the A15 amendment? Representative Koznick?
Yeah, I'm surprised there's not any committee questions or discussions on it, but I guess I will close then. we've heard this. This isn't a new idea in the short time that I've been here at the Capitol. And those of you that have followed are familiar with a previous joint powers agreement called CTIB, the counties, transportation. I don't even remember now. Help me out.
Madam Chair.
Help me out.
Representative Hornstein.
Counties Transit Improvement Board, but it no
That's-
longer
yeah.
exists, Representative
Yeah.
Cosner.
That's correct, Madam Chair, if I could have the floor back.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we had CTIB, and to the points of a couple commissioners yesterday, that didn't work out well. And so what this amendment does is it allows a county to, my intent is to prevent from another CTIB really to be happening because it didn't work out well for Anoka, Dakota County, Carver and Scott County chose not to be in it. You'd made the comments that, the areas that use the transit will be paying for it. But that's not exactly the way it's worked out in the past. And that's why I oppose this part of your bill, proposing another sales tax. And you made up a good point that this is similar to what we currently have, and many counties have utilized it across the state. But what your bill does by imposing this again is kind of steps on the toes of counties that haven't felt that they need to use their utilization of a sales tax authorization that they currently have. And so that's fine that that's currently in statute, but I think your bill prematurely steps on the toes of the counties that are planning out their transit system, their transportation system. For instance, Dakota County or a couple of Anoka, I think a couple of the other counties in the metro are still, we don't have the need for a higher tax right now for these needs. But when that need comes, the legislature in the past has provided them an opportunity to generate their own funds for their own needs. And I think that's more appropriate. And so reinventing CTIB 2.0, I might call it, you had your quib with earmark palooza. I might call this CTIB 2.0 because it's not going to go anywhere. And it's just not a good idea. I mean, it was very, very painful to watch Dakota County residents pay into that. And I think for every dollar we paid in, we got 7 cents back. And it just wasn't adequate or equitable or fair. We were just kind of being used as a piggy bank, and that's what this part of your bill does. And so, we've had good discussions about this, but I think there's better ways to do it. And I'm concerned that adding another sales tax would come back and take away the punch that we've previously authorized counties to levy their own tax for their own purpose, but also at the right time, at the time of their choosing, instead of mandating it. And I guess I'll just kind of leave it at that for today.
Okay. Representative Hornstein, and then after that, Representative Petersburg, and hopefully we can keep Representative Torkelson awake here now that he's gotten comfortable.
Madam Chair, I didn't realize that Representative Petersburg was on here, so I'll just make a couple of closing comments before we vote.
Okay, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm sorry, I was a little asleep too, because I didn't get it, my hand raised quick enough before you called on Representative Koznick. So I really apologize for stepping on his toes for having last event. But I want to kind of remind us back to, again, CTIB, which had the authority to issue a half-cent sales tax in the metropolitan area. And it's because as we started looking at the needs of transportation throughout the state, the metro area was really finding itself short on funding and for transit and really needing that funding. Where Greater Minnesota, transit doesn't work as well. And so the needs that they have were much different. And if I remember right, in 2013, how we sold and how we designed it was that this gave the other counties the ability to raise the half-cent sales tax for transportation needs that they needed to do as well. So I see that if we're going to initiate a half-cent sales tax additionally in the metro area, it does make sense to allow other counties to do it. And I do like the idea that this becomes a referendum because it's important for us to know that individual taxpayers and the communities within them have authority over increasing their own taxing rather than us being involved with it. So I just wanted to share with you that I think if you're going to do something in the metro area for metro needs, because there are different needs in greater Minnesota, doesn't mean that there's a need for additional funding. Obviously, we've been talking about that all day, about increased funding. So I just wanted to bring a little comparison to that discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you. Just to quickly wrap up, and thanks for the discussion, Madam Chair. I just wanted to let folks know that this is what we have in the bill is in no way another version of CTIB. In fact, it goes a different direction because we are asking the Met Council. This money really goes for, and as you point out in your amendment, Representative Koznick, I mean, the priorities are for arterial bus rapid transit, for metro mobility, for really upgrading the local bus service, which this is really the bread and butter of what needs to happen. And so the reason we had CTIB in the first place is that when we did the 2008 bill, the Metropolitan Council and that administration did not want to take the money. They felt that this, for various reasons, which we can get into, that the administration. So there was some scrambling that had to be done, and CTIB was created because we were going to have a 0.5-cent sales tax, but it had to go somewhere. And so the counties have stepped up. I mean, they were not in the transit business. They didn't really choose necessarily to be in the transit business, but someone had to receive that sales tax. And so we've had different machinations of this over the years. And what's ended up happening is that the counties ended up using that money for transit ways and those types of capital projects, but not, it was not for the local bus service. It was not for arterial BRT necessarily. And so that's what the need is now moving forward. So the revenue will go to the Met Council, not to the counties. And I just wanted to clarify that. And I don't think anyone, Representative Koznick, would want to go back to that model. And I think you identified issues with it. But we do have counties that are collecting a portion, a sales tax now, and that is going for some of the larger transitway projects for the most part.
Thank you, Representative Hornstein. Representative Koznick, I'll let you have the last word on the amendment before we move to a vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Hornstein, you'd made some comments yesterday that apparently there were media reports calling this the light rail tax. And part of this amendment, we'll take you at your word, but as they say, trust but verify. But part of this amendment does make it solely for the BRT, and hopefully that's a part that you would acknowledge, and maybe on a separate amendment, or we can work on the language as we progress to clarify that, because I think that is important. If this isn't a light rail tax, then let's verify that and put that in there. That's on line 1.15 of the amendment. And you'd made the other comment that previous administration didn't want to have that within the Met Council, so that's created CTIB. I'm not sure that we've heard that our current Met Council wants this additional funds anyways. They are going to be receiving and have received an enormous amount of money through the federal government to cover their current shortfalls, and we still have more financial concerns down the road, but this would provide them a credit card, and in my opinion, they're already overextended. We're giving them another credit card to continue some spending that I think is a little bit more controversial. So we have not heard from the Met Council that I'm aware of that they actually even want this, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday with the additional funds going to Greater Minnesota Transit and what their reserves were in that. And so that was a discussion that we had a little bit yesterday, and I think we need to continue to have that. And so I'm not in favor of this part of your bill, but I offer the amendment to try to clean up some of that other area. I think additional is working forward. If you would be agreeable, would be to put in that certain guarantees, as the Anoka commissioner had mentioned yesterday. If they're going to be forced to be into something like this, what is the return that each county can expect? Because kind of socializing it out, someone's going to get left short for the money that they're put in. So I think the better way to do it, with respect, Chair Hornstein, is what we have in statute now that allows each county to exercise their own sales tax for their own needs, and keep the state government out of it so that they can operate it more themselves. But so those are my comments. I would ask for a roll call and encourage members to support it.
All right, with the roll call being requested, Mr. Dodge, would you please take the roll?
Chair Cagle?
No.
Cagle, nay. Representative Hornstein?
No.
Hornstein, nay. Representative Petersburg?
Aye.
Petersburg, aye. Representative Barr?
Aye.
Barr, aye. Representative Bernardi?
Nay.
Bernardi, nay. Representative Elkins?
Elkins, nay.
Elkins, nay. Representative Frederick? Representative Frederick? Representative Hausman?
No.
Hausman, nay. Representative Heinrich?
Heinrich, aye.
Heinrich, aye. Representative Kosnick?
Kosnick, aye.
Kosnick, aye. Representative Mason?
No.
Mason, nay. Representative Murphy?
Murphy, no.
Murphy, nay. Representative Nelson?
Nelson, no.
Nelson, nay. Representative Olson?
Yes.
Olson, aye. Representative Richardson?
No.
Richardson, nay. Representative Torkelson?
Aye.
Torkelson, aye. Representative West?
Aye.
West, aye. There are 7 ayes and 9 nays.
Representative Frederick votes no. Sorry, I'm having service issues.
There are 7 ayes and 10 nays.
Thank you. The motion does not prevail. So now we are on to the A17 amendment. This is Representative Elkins. Would you like to tell us about the amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. So just for a little bit of background context. So this year I am the author of the Deputy Registrar's fee increase bill, House File 54. And we did not hear the bill in committee this year because I never had any indication from my Senate author, Senator Jasinski, that the bill had any prospects of moving in the other chamber. But within the last just several days, an alternative proposal has emerged in the Senate, which I expect to be discussed when we get to negotiations with the other chamber. And so I'm offering this amendment for discussion purposes to as a potential counter to the Senate offer, so to speak. So as we have discussed in past years, right now, when we as part of the implementation of MnDrive, we knew that when we did that we would be deliberately, as part of the design of the project, shifting workload from the back office at DVS to the front counter at the deputy registrars. And the deputy registrars have put forth data that clearly show that as a response, and plus with the the looming deadlines on Real ID as well, that their transaction times have grown. So with respect to driver's licenses, the time motion study that they had done in December of 2018 showed a driver's license transaction taking a little over 8 minutes. In March 2021, it's now taking over 11 and a half minutes, and Real ID transactions are taking over 16 minutes. So the more complex vehicle titling transactions were taking about a little over 7 minutes in November of 2018, and are now taking over 11 minutes in March of 2021. And I was able to reach out to a couple of the deputy registrar organizations that I'm familiar with to get some data. So in my own city of Bloomington, the deputy registrar's office has been permanently closed now this year because it was running an annual deficit of over $350,000 a year. And when I reached out to officials in Hennepin County, I was told that the year before the pandemic, 2019, they were already running a $2.8 million deficit that was being paid for by property taxes in Hennepin County in 2019. This year, obviously, in 2020, obviously, we have the pandemic impact, and that deficit went up to balloon to $6.2 million. So, and there at Hennepin County told me that they're looking at needing to be able to add 16 people to their county service centers to handle real ID and vehicle registrations, just to work down the backlog right now of expired driver's licenses. I'm being told that a typical driver's license, if you want to get an appointment to get a driver's license extension in Hennepin County right now, the appointment backlog is 4 to 6 weeks, and I understand that that's pretty typical around the state as well. So we're facing a huge workload backlog, both at DVS and in the deputy registrar's front offices, because of over expired driver's licenses and the upcoming real ID deadline, which is currently set at October 1st. And at the same time, we're facing these backlogs. We're losing capacity among the deputy registrar population, with Bloomington being the prime example, because they just can't bear the losses anymore. So this proposal that came up out of the Senate within the last week kind of recognizes that we are expecting a work shift from back office DVS to front counter deputy registrar. But I'm going to actually, I've got a slide on this I'm going to share just because it has all the numbers in one place. There we go. Load that up so it's easier to read. There we go. Okay, so the current fee structure has a routine registration renewal costs $7. More complex ones are $11. Driver's licenses are $8. And the party that collects the fee gets to keep it all, whether it's the deputy registrar who handle about over 2/3 of the transactions overall, or DVS who by the web or by mail handles the remaining 1/3 or maybe a little less than 1/3. So in the Senate proposal, the fees would have been kept the same, except that $1 would be diverted out of DVS as part of their operating funds. They're $550 they keep out of a charge for routine renewals, $3 out of the more complex renewals, and $3 out of driver's licenses. And this would have come directly out of DVS's operating revenues without anything being backfilled. And the rough estimate is that would have represented something on the order of a $12 million shift out of DVS to the registrars with no backfilling at all. So by comparison, the fee increases that I had in House File 54 would have raised the fees to $10, $17, and $16, with each party remaining in possession of the funds that they collected. And it would have represented a substantial revenue gain to both DVS and the deputy registrars. So in this A17 amendment, I've taken a hybrid approach, to have something to counter the Senate proposal with. So this one reduces the fee increases down to $2 on routine registration renewals, $3 increase on the more complex titles, and $4 on driver's licenses. And then still has the transfer of funds, or some transfer of funds from DVS to the deputy registrars as outlined in the Senate bill, a little bit less on driver's licenses, But the idea is that there would be enough, that DVS's share of the increase would be large enough to hold them harmless from the amount that they would be shifting from their pot to the deputy registrar's pot. So I'm only offering this for kind of information discussion purposes. I'm going to withdraw it because I don't have the math quite right, especially on this part. So if you take the assumption that the deputy registrars do about 2/3 of the transactions, DVS 1/3, the amount of the increase in the charge has to be double about the amount that you transfer to the deputy registrar's transactions to make it a break even for DVS. And I botched that in this middle category. And as a result, it's actually the current projection, it's still just back of the envelope. And one of the reasons I'm going to withdraw the amendment is that additional number crunching needs to be done to make things balance out right. But with the amendment as it's drafted right now, it looks like it would still cost DVS about $2 million from their operating funds. But I offer this as a counter to what may be coming from the Senate as a compromise solution.
Thank you, Representative Elkins. We have a couple questions here. Representative Torkelson?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for reminding me that there are times when I should stop my video. In my defense, I spent most of the evening babysitting, which is an activity which I am not used to doing, but and you are. But onto this issue, I'm pleased that Representative Elkins has brought this very important issue forward. I'm honestly surprised that his bringing it forward was dependent on whether or not there was action taken in the Senate. Seems to me there are plenty of issues in this bill that are acted on the House side and have no chance of surviving or being acted on in the Senate in any way, shape, or fashion. But that doesn't distract from the importance of this issue. Deputy registrars are the backbone of supplying services to the citizens of Minnesota when it comes to driver's licenses, titles, and tabs. And we have neglected them this session. We should have been working on this issue, and I fully admit I didn't bring a bill forward. I probably should have. But the issue is very important. Representative Elkins is correct in that some of our deputy registrars are barely hanging on. That may be partly a result of COVID, but it's also a result of the actions we've taken here in this legislature regarding compensation for the activity that they do. MNLARS, thank goodness, is working well, but when MNLARS was enacted, it changed the compensation and it changed the workload, as Representative Elkins has pointed out earlier. It changed the workload at the counter for these deputy registrars and their employees, and we need to recognize that. I would hope that you're bringing this forward, Representative Elkins, actually at least establishes it, if not being adopted, at least establish the importance of the issue as this bill heads into conference committee with the Senate. And I encourage Representative Hornstein, the author of the bill, to acknowledge that and try to figure out something to keep these very important private businesses, in many cases, in some cases public businesses, because they're supplied by the county, keep them in business. They are what many of us across the state rely on to do these transactions and get them done in a timely fashion. So with that, Madam Chair, I will just stop, I guess. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Representative Torkelson. Representative Petersburg?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I will follow and echo what Representative Torkelson said. I really appreciate this bill coming forward, Representative Elkins. And I know you and I have talked a little bit about this, and I think you're on the right track. I want to refer us back to the OLA report came out in, I believe, in February, really talking about the driver's license system and how one of their recommendations, they were one of 3 recommendations, saying that we need to deal with the funding shortage that is occurring at our deputy registers. Oftentimes we think of deputy registers as a private enterprise and kind of outside of the agency, which is easy to do, but they're not. They really are an extension of Department of Vehicle Services and something that we need to respond to, that when there is a change in workload, that there is a corresponding change in funding for that particular process as well. So I think we need to keep moving forward to this, and I hope we can do something beyond this as well, because I think it's important. And so thank you for bringing this forward, and I'm sorry we can't get it included into the bill today. Thank you,
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg. Representative Chair Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know we're not voting on this, and but I also want to express my appreciation to Representative Elkins. Representative Elkins and I have been in close touch over the last couple of days. He's kept me in the loop about his understandings about where this is. I think his proposal is far better than the Senate proposal. And Representative Torkelson, you make an excellent point about ensuring that we have an alternative to that. And I think, but for some of the issues around funding and financing, Representative Elkins is a pretty late stage of developing this proposal. And so, like you, Representative Torkelson, I would encourage Representative Elkins to keep at it. Let's get some solid numbers. Let's continue to talk with DVS as well. I think you outlined a strong case for why we should be attentive to this. So again, this is, it may seem that we're late in the process, but maybe we're in halftime or the third quarter of our legislative session. So there's still quite a bit to go, and I think you have the support of this committee, Representative Elkins, both sides of the aisle, to continue working on this. So I appreciated your thorough presentation and your work on this, and also your recognition that we need to get the money straight here, and that's why we can't include it in the bill. But you have support, and I encourage you to continue your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
With that,
Chair
I
Horn.
will withdraw the amendment.
Representative Elkins withdraws the amendment. Next on the agenda, we have the A18 and A19 from Representative Torkelson. Did you want to offer both, or was there just one?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will not be offering the A18. I would like to offer the A19. They both deal with the same topic.
Okay, we will, Representative Torkelson will move the A19 amendment. Would you like to please describe the A19?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This relates to an issue that was dealt with a few years ago regarding hauling construction materials to the construction sites and allowing trucks to run heavier weights, which actually saves significant amounts of funds that would otherwise be spent on extra truckloads when it comes to building roads across the state of Minnesota. There was a problem with definition of what would be hauled and what couldn't be hauled. And frankly, this has been in the process of negotiation between interested parties, including local government, those that haul these materials, the construction industry, and the labor industry. And I've been waiting for peace in the valley, and I'm not sure that we have it. I think there may be testifiers that may give us some more information, a better description than what I'm able to offer at this point in time, Madam Chair. So if they are prepared to testify, that would be wonderful. If they're not, I would suggest we just go to a vote.
I see that we have Mr. Reynoso on the unmuted and on, and I also have a note here that John Cunningham, if he would like to testify as well. Mr. Reynoso, welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Edward Reynoso. I'm the political director for Teamsters Joint Council 32. We represent in excess of 62,000 active and retired members in the state of Minnesota. And I thank you for the opportunity to be able to testify in opposition to the A19 amendment. There's an old adage that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And as the largest organization who represents a lion's share of workers impacted by this proposal, it's unfortunate that as of now, the advocates or the author of this amendment have not engaged in any conversation with us as a stakeholder to understand the impact to our members. There are many objections that the proposed legislation has that we have for the legislation, starting with the misconception of it being a clarification. I could tell you that in 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, and 17, not once with conversations with Mr. Willamy, Mr. Corrigan, and Mr. Seifert, have we ever heard that this was the intent of this legislation was to transport product from the pit to the plant. There was never a conversation about the current statute, which was passed in 2017, as I said, to move from pit to plant. The entire conversation consisted of the reduction of a material cost being delivered directly to a construction site. As a matter of fact, Representative Torkelson alluded to that at the very beginning. And he had said that it was about delivering product to the construction site. Secondly, there is nothing in this proposed amendment that guarantees that all or part of these products will be used strictly for road construction, which is why we see this as an expansion of the current statute and not a clarification. Furthermore, we believe that the proposed amendment will put our drivers and the general public at a higher risk from a safety component and further deteriorate our local, county, and state highway systems by adding additional wear and tear. Now, none of these trucks will be allowed on our federal highway system. That limit will remain at 80,000 pounds. Finally, in the most recent MAP 21 comprehensive truck size and weight limit study report to Congress, it concluded, and I quote, "It stressed that no changes in the relevant federal truck size and weight laws and regulations should be made until certain limitations are overcome." The report cited the lack of information and data that the results of the study could not accurately and confidently predict national impacts on safety, truck configuration, weight and motion, motor carrier management IS, compliance enforcement, modal shift, passenger car equivalents, and a host of other areas. It's for these and many other reasons that we stand in opposition to the A19 amendment and its inclusion in the Omnibus Transportation Finance and Policy Bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will, Mr. Cunningham, welcome to the committee. If you could please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon. I'm John Cunningham. I'm the Executive Director of the Aggregate and Ready Mix Association of Minnesota. Thank you for an opportunity to offer comments on behalf of Minnesota's aggregate and concrete producers in regards to Amendment A19. We are supportive, very supportive of the proposed amendment, and would like to thank Representative Torkelson for his leadership and the efforts of the Department of Transportation, the Department of Public Safety, and the Regional Railroads Association for their collaboration. The amendment provides clarification, and with all due respect, it absolutely is a clarification for law enforcement on the current law in section 169.869. It clarifies how this truck weight permit is applied today. It does not expand the scope of the permit. It simply clarifies what the current practice is. Our state's producers of construction materials provide the building blocks of our infrastructure. Passage of 169.869 in 2017, so it's been 4 years, made transportation of these bulk materials more efficient and lowered the carbon emissions through reduction of necessary loads. Section 169.869 is a very important part of today's operations, and it's a very important part of our future by helping us to continue reducing the global warming potential of construction materials. Now, since passage of 169.869 4 years ago, producers of aggregates and concrete all across Minnesota have invested hundreds of millions of dollars into the equipment to meet the requirements of that statute. They've been operating within those requirements since that time without incident. I'm not aware of any examples of safety issues or hazardous spills or road damage attributable to these permits during the years since the statute was passed. Again, the purpose of the amendment is to provide clarification, not expansion of the status quo. I thank Representative Torkelson for offering the amendment, which eliminates confusion over the definition of the materials and their transport. It preserves the spirit and the current operation and does not expand its use. Therefore, we support its passage and encourage you to do so also. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. Is there any further discussion to the A19 amendment?
Madam Chair,
Representative Torkelson.
thank you. Just a few closing remarks, unless there's other remarks. I don't see any. I would encourage a yes vote on the amendment. It was never my intention to eliminate anyone from these negotiations, although I personally have not been taking part in the current round of calls and I guess Zooms, if there have been such things. I don't know if these guys have been Zooming as much as I have, but it's an example of how hard it is to kind of keep things moving in a Zoom environment. But it is my intention that this be clarification. I would hope that communication would continue. I'm going to ask for a vote on the amendment. I will not ask for a roll call. I know that this is an important clarification. That was the intention of the amendment and the intention of the negotiations to reach the point where it is a clarification. And I would encourage those involved to continue negotiating to get this language to match up with current practice. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Torkelson. Representative Hornstein, Chair Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Torkelson, for your efforts at trying to reach agreement here. I think we have a basket of, sort of 3 thorny issues that are maybe 4 even that just require further conversations. And I'm glad we have members on both sides of the aisle that are addressing these. I'll just mention them now quickly, and then I'll get to the issue at hand. Representative Cagle has been involved in this issue with contractors and MnDOT. We still need to resolve that moving forward. We have this piece, we have the salvage title piece that needs additional work. Representative Petersburg, appreciate your efforts there. And then, of course, we have Representative Elkins and the DR. Again, we have some time, not much, but we have time. And of course, we can't get everything done and with our deadline here, but these are things that need more time and need more discussion. And so this is one of those. And I value Mr. Reynoso's perspective on this. I think labor is an important interested party. And it just seems as I listen, really the issue before us is to get some clarification on what clarification means, right? And so I hope that everyone will stay engaged here. And but at this time, I would recommend a no vote. I think while significant progress has been made, and several people have been involved in this, going back and forth trying to reach agreement, but clearly we don't have that today. And an issue like this, I would like to have consensus. There's some that we can't reach consensus on, and but I hope we can on this. But everyone needs to stay engaged. But today, I'm saying a no, recommending a no vote.
Thank you. I don't see any further discussion to the A19 amendment. So we will move to the vote. If you guys could all unmute yourselves. Excuse me. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
No.
Nay.
Motion does not prevail. And so we will move on. It looks like there's one last amendment to the DE2. The A22 oral amendment from Chair Bernardi. So which I understand, so that is an oral amendment being offered, Representative Bernardi, is that correct?
Yes. Whoops. Yes.
Can you please explain the A22 amendment, please?
Thank you. I will give a little bit of background. This is for our work zone safety pilot assessment. We meant to have in there July 31st, not July 1st. Sort of technical, but it does give an extra month, so it's very important. And it is, and we can have Matt Burris help us with this as well, but it's on page 122, line 21, to delete 1 and insert 31, which would make it it would make it due on the 31st, not the 1st.
Is there any discussion to the A22 amendment? Seeing none, we can move to a vote on that one. So if you'd like to please unmute yourself again. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Motion prevails. Thank you, Representative Bernardi. All right. We're back on the DE. So members, we're now back on the DE amendment as amended. Is there any further discussion to the bill? To the DE amendment as amended?
I actually have something.
Okay, Representative Bernardi.
Madam Chair, I just want to verify that verbal amendment was moved.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Howe?
I would actually defer to Mr. Burris to clarify that as well.
Mr. Burris.
I believe it was offered, but if Mr. Burris could help clarify that.
Madam Chair, members, my understanding is that the amendment was offered, voted on, and adopted by the committee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure the process was followed properly. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Representative Koznick.
Thank you. And I just wanted to make some comments to thank the chair for the work on this committee this year, and his approach is well appreciated across the Capitol, and to be on your committee and the way you run it. You know, in transportation, we started off the year, and I in my term here, kind of recognize how it's kind of evolved, but we still always have very much the same funding challenges. And so I tried to offer some ideas to help overcome a little bit, and have wish you the best to have a sizable bill. It's not going to be a earth-shattering bill. I think there's a lot of things in here that just aren't going to go, and you probably know that as well, looking at the bill in the Senate. But I just, you know, it's a big task, and I appreciate your leadership on it, and I hope that we can find agreement on some of the things that sounds like we're in agreement on, and there's some things that we're approaching that hopefully, you know, this year, if not sooner, down the road, we can have some additional make progress. And I think that's people try to hit this big home run of a, you know, earth-shattering transportation bill that solves all our needs, but I think it's you know, just getting a single or a double here and there, as the 2017 bill made some major progress. So I wish you the best on that part, and if there's things that we can find better consensus on, happy to continue to lend my support. So thank you for the work, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Koznick. Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A procedural question. We first then need to adopt the DE2 amendment and then have final passage of 1684. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
So right now we're speaking to the DE amendment. I don't know if people want to wait until final passage of the House file as amended. Representative Bernardi and Representative Torkelson, did you want to wait until after we adopt the amendment? You're muted.
Yes, I can wait. Thank you.
I'll wait too, Madam Chair.
Okay, so why don't we just go ahead and vote on the DE2 amendment as amended. Representative Chair Hornstein, would you like to move the DE2 amendment as amended?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I move the DE2 amendment as amended.
All right, with that, if everybody could unmute themselves. All those in favor of the DE2 amendment as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
No.
Motion prevails. So now we are on to the onto House File 1684 as amended. Representative Bernardi, did you want to speak to the bill?
Yes, Madam Chair. I want to thank Chair Hornstein and the putting together this bill. It has important provisions to help make it safe for everybody who uses our transportation system. And I especially want to point out the creating the bike and creating funding for the active transportation account, bringing back the advisory committee, passing important laws that we've passed off the House floor in the past unanimously to help keep people who bike safer on the roadways. And so and safe routes to school is another important element of this bill. And so I really want to thank Chair Hornstein for putting together this bill that's comprehensive and addressing many of our transportation needs as it relates to how people choose to move about. And then I also want to make comment about the performance measure provision and how we worked together bipartisanly for a number of years on those provisions. And we came up with languages here that could be moved forward. And I want to thank you for that as well. So I encourage members to vote in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bernardi. Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Representative Hornstein for his work. He is dedicated to transit and transportation, and my remarks are not meant to be personal, but I have to admit that I am disappointed. I feel like this is kind of the first day we've really gotten to work on transportation issues in a significant way. Too many issues were left until the DE was introduced. Too many issues were not heard properly in committee, if at all. This bill raises significant amounts of money, and we didn't really talk about how to raise money during the committee process. I will leave it at that, Madam Chair, but I think we can do better.
Thank you, Representative Torkelson. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. Sorry, it came so quick. I didn't get unmuted quick enough. But again, I also want to echo a thank you to the chair for putting forth this bill and for working with us and really spending some time helping me to understand what's going on and listening to some of my concerns as well. I think in regards to a bipartisan approach, other than our varying differences and the directions that we think we ought to go, I do believe that the conversation and discussion was open, and I really appreciate that ability to work as a colleague with Chair Hornstein. But at this point, of course, coming out of committee, I see that there are really some major changes. I'm concerned about the amount of dollars that are being raised when we have two looming issues coming up before us, $1.6 billion surplus and massive dollars coming from the federal government, and whether or not we ought to rather be leveraging those dollars for infrastructure. And because I think that when we have surpluses and dollars coming from federal government, those should be done for one-time expenditures and not necessarily for long-term. And I think that gives us an opportunity to do some of those one-time events now, allowing then not having to spend those dollars for maintenance, and then allowing us then to use the additional dollars for future needs. But that's a direction that I would prefer to go. I do think that we are going to have to struggle and spend a great deal of time talking about where the funding mechanisms are going to happen to be in the future. And that's not going to be easy. And it's not always mean that we're going to agree on those. And so I appreciate the future discussion. I appreciate the fact that we're able to discuss it at least today. I share Representative Torkelson's concern that some of these major issues would have been nice to have had a little bit more time in an actual committee process. Sometimes this year, especially with COVID and distance, that made it much more difficult. And I understand that that is part of it. But we will continue to work together, and I will continue to appreciate all the support that Chair Hornstein has for both transportation as well as listening to our concerns as well. And thank you for this opportunity. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg. Representative West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Chair Hornstein, I want to say, like, you have run this committee in a way that actually includes all the voices, and I do really appreciate that across the board. We haven't seen that in all committees in this terrifying Zoomscape, but we have seen it in your committee, and it's much appreciated. And that goes for Representative Kegel as well. She's done a great job. Even when we're criticizing her provisions directly, she's been very fair and allowed the minority to have our voice. And that's really goes a long way, especially if the majorities happen to switch in the future. And with this bill, you've heard a lot of Republicans talk about revenue, and a lot of Democrats say Republicans don't want any revenue, and so on and so forth. But you'll find, like, we all acknowledge we need money for a road and bridge system. Our concern is how it will be spent. And that's when it gets into the debate over, Northstar, light rail, and those kind of things. When Governor Walz came out with the 20-cent gas tax increase, that really destroyed our ability to have a reasonable debate on it. I mean, that's way too large. I mean, this was the previous budget session, but you can find some ground there, I think, among it. We just have to approach it in a way where we trust how the money's going to be spent, and we can have a good discussion on revenue. Automatic tax increases, while some states do them, you're going to find probably zero support for that from our caucus, which is also the Senate's case. So there is room for revenue, I think, in the fee depreciation schedule, and maybe a tab increase or something like that, but a broadly based one that actually raises revenue without really hitting people in the pocketbook. Those are ways we can advance, and everybody thinks we need to
There's
get
no
more.
such thing as that.
Representative Nelson, you're not on mute.
So rude.
Apologies. Go ahead, Representative West.
And we need to actually do revenue in a way that raises revenue, which we all agree on, that actually can get support from both sides of the aisle. Because in the present rate, we're going to run into another lights on transportation bill with looking at the Senate's bill and this bill. So thank you for really providing a voice for the minority. We really appreciate that. And look at some of the revenue suggestions that are coming from our side of the aisle, which obviously if we need more money for the roads. So let's try and do something we can all agree on, because that is my favorite part of being on the Transportation Committee, is this is a real debate that we actually can have rather than just screaming at each other like crazy banshees like we see in a lot of our other committees. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Representative Kegel. Won't be supporting the bill, but we'll see how it goes going forward.
Thank you, Representative West. I just also wanted to take some time to really thank Representative Hornstein. It's been a really great year working with him side by side on this bill. I do think that we absolutely need to see some increases in revenue, and the fact that the gas tax is a user fee, but we haven't increased funding on the gas tax for 13 years. And the only reason we got that increase 13 years ago was because a bridge collapsed and 13 people died. And we want to make sure that that does not happen again. So we have to make sure that these bridges, our roads, I mean, we see it up every day up in our neck of the woods, Representative West, with Highway 65 being very dangerous, and University Highway 47 having a lot of pedestrian issues. So we can't continue to ignore these problems. I do think the one-time money will help, but it's not going to solve our problems long-term. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're setting our system up for success in the future. We can use some of this one-time money to fund some of these projects, but we need to make sure that we're not ignoring the future projects. And so I really do appreciate everybody's willingness to work on this issue, and the fact that we all recognize that we do need new revenue into this system in order to complete projects that are on the that need to be completed. For instance, Highway 65. I know I've been saying this one all the time. Highway 65 and 47. And so these are big issues that we need to solve, and I do believe we can do it together. And I'm really glad to hear that we all recognize that we do need to get some new revenue into the system. And so I think that's a big step forward. And so now we just need to figure out how we solve this problem. of our deteriorating infrastructure. And I think the one thing that, with the gas tax, with the indexing of the gas tax, it's not going to add, a whole lot of new revenue, but at least it'll help keep up with inflation so that we are able to do these. And just a reminder too, that the indexing of the gas tax will only go to roads and bridges. So, that is going to help get some of these projects up and off the ground. And so I just really want to thank everybody. And I will turn it over to Chair Hornstein for final comments.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair and members. We're reaching a milestone here in our work together, which is to pass an omnibus bill. And just before I get into the omnibus bill, just briefly, I wanted to once again thank the members, each and every one of you, for your contributions, your substantive contributions, your civility, your passion, your interest in transportation across the board. I feel so lucky, so honored to be able to work with all of you and to chair this committee. I mentioned this on Tuesday in my introductory comments, but it bears noting again our incredible staff, both partisan and nonpartisan, and I've enjoyed again our work together. It's not the end here. We have several more committee stops to the floor, and of course, a number of you mentioned conference committee. And I think we had a really good week this week. I think that we, as Representative Torkelson said, really, with the extra time that we were able to plan, we got into some really important issues. We had substantive conversations, in-depth conversations. And it still concerns me that there's a narrative that somehow this committee didn't do much this year. I could not disagree with that more. I think we'll get an exact number, I think, perhaps from Mr. Howe, but we heard over close to 60 bills and amendments. We have 35 different individual member provisions involving policy and finance in this bill. We had many bill hearings. I think all of those hearings, everyone had a chance to speak. No one was cut off. I don't understand the hand-wringing about this. We had a number of informational hearings where we had tremendous high-quality testimony that set the stage for some of the key provisions in this bill. And while we have several items of interest in the finance part, we followed custom and usage in the House on omnibus bills. We unveiled it. We had 9 hours of conversation. Well, we're going on 9 hours. We're in our 9th hour of conversation this week. And so that is a bill hearing, members. That's actually a super bill hearing. So I'm proud of the process. It's been a good process. Of course, it's had its challenges, as we have every year, with getting every bit of work done. And of course, Zoom is and all of the pressures we have with the pandemic have been an additional challenge. But everybody has risen to the occasion in substantive ways. We have got an incredible amount of work done. A credible number of people have testified before this committee. So we have had a good process, and we have a good product in this bill. Members, I've been thinking a lot about the idea of generations this week. There's that Iroquois principle that decisions we make should result in a sustainable world 7 generations from now. I started talking about my colleague and my mentor, Representative Leader. I've been thinking about him. I've been thinking about another giant in Minnesota transportation, Representative Jim Oberstar. We stand on their shoulders in terms of moving forward substantive legislation. And Representative Leader was 97 years old when he passed away last year. And so I've been thinking about the next generation coming up, right? The honorary member of our committee who does not have an election certificate, but Representative Cagle's daughter, Clara, has been a part of so many of our meetings, both in this committee and some of our DFL caucuses. And so, you know, I was thinking about when Clara is 16, which I believe will be 2035. Am I getting that right, Representative Cagle? She's
14 years from now. So yeah.
yeah. So Clara in 2035 will be getting her driver's license. And so I'm wondering, so what kind of world will Clara be living in when she's 16? What kind of roads will she be driving on? What will be the state of our climate? Will our country and our state finally have done the hard work and heavy lifting that we need to achieve racial justice and reconciliation? Will she be able to enjoy all parts of Minnesota, all regions? Will she have choices if she wants to drive, if she wants to take transit, if she wants to bike and walk? We are doing this work for Clara and for her kids. This is our long-term goal that is ahead of us. We cannot continue to pass transportation bills that just keep us limping along one year after the next. I will return to some of the most important testimony we heard. I referenced it earlier, but I want to underline it again. When Commissioner Anderson Kelleher came to this committee and warned us of the consequences of our lack of investment in infrastructure, that we will literally see more bridges like the Stearns County engineer showed us on a videotape. She showed us rebar sticking out from underneath a bridge that was literally crumbling when she poked it with a rod. We heard from the Winona County engineer who showed us rutted roads that were almost looked abandoned. They were in such bad shape from our underinvestment. This is the consequence of not moving forward in a substantive way. In the first year alone, we have $627 million of new transportation investments. And I know that while we've heard, yes, we need more revenue, but that seems to be the refrain from the other side of the aisle. The plan that was presented earlier this week raises $18 million in the first biennium. So members, there's a huge gap. We're raising almost $600 million more dollars. But I also want to say that we are making important concessions. We are saying that, Representative West, I think you made an important point that if the plan in 2019 was a non-starter, then let's have a plan that is at least a starter for some bipartisanship. And I'm pleased that we had everyone from an Anoka County Commissioner to some favorable comments from the Chamber of Commerce that I think we've made a start with this bill. And so we have an inflationary adjustment on the motor fuels tax. That is an important start. That is an important concession. We have conceded to the other side of the aisle the general fund money that you allocated in 2017. But we know that's not sustainable. And we know we can't continue to take money from education and healthcare to fund our transportation system. We need new, dedicated, reliable resources for transportation so that Clara can drive on safe roads, that she can have choices, so that she can live in on a planet where the air is clean and she can drink fresh water, that our climate is stable. These are all of the issues raised in this bill, and that we have finally achieved racial equity and racial reconciliation, which we have learned this year is such an integral part to what we do in transportation. So members, let's cast a vote yes for our important work we're doing with small cities and townships. Let's cast a yes vote for safety improvements. Let's cast a yes vote for jobs and economic development, that these new substantive investments in transit and transportation, road and bridge infrastructure will accrue. Let's cast a yes vote for racial equity. Let's cast a yes vote for our climate. Members, that is all in this bill. I thank you for your support. I thank you for giving me this incredible opportunity. I look forward to continuing to shepherd this bill through the process, make changes where we can, bring a bill to conference committee. I am buoyed by some comments I've heard from the other side of the aisle that I think may be helpful in that process so that we can reach our common goal of a substantive transportation bill that moves us forward on all fronts. Thank you for your support. I ask for your yes vote.
Thank you, Chair Hornstein. And with that, Chair Hornstein renews his motion that House File 1684 as amended be referred to the Tax Committee and direct staff to make technical corrections as needed. Mr. Dodge, will you please take the roll?
Chair Cagle?
Aye.
Cagle, aye. Representative Hornstein?
Aye.
Hornstein, aye. Representative Petersburg?
No.
Petersburg, nay. Representative Barr?
Nope.
Barr, nay. Representative Bernardi?
Aye.
Bernardi, aye. Representative Elkins?
Elkins, aye.
Elkins, aye. Representative Frederick?
Aye.
Frederick, aye. Representative Hausman?
Aye.
Hausman, aye. Representative Heinrich?
Heinrich, no.
Heinrich, nay. Representative Kosnick?
No.
Kosnick, nay. Representative Mason?
Mason, aye.
Mason, aye. Representative Murphy?
Murphy, yes.
Murphy, aye. Representative Nelson?
Nelson, aye.
Nelson, aye. Representative Olson?
No.
Olson, nay. Representative Richardson?
Yes.
Richardson, aye. Representative Torkelson?
No.
Torkelson, nay. Representative West?
No.
West, nay. There are 10 ayes and 7 nays.
There being 10 ayes and 7 nays, the motion prevails. Thank you, Chair Hornstein. And is there any closing comments or announcements that we have for the committee, Chair Hornstein?
Thank you very much. And again, special thanks to you, Vice Chair Cagle, for not only your work today. I know this was probably not the easiest meeting to chair. We've now going on our 4th hour here, but I do appreciate so much all of your work and all the heavy lifting you did on the road and bridge funding provisions in this bill. I appreciate that so much. Members, there are a number of informational hearings that we will be scheduling in the coming weeks. I am going to be continuing my frequent conversations with Representative Petersburg on which topics that we want to hear about, scheduling those meetings. So we are not by any means done with our work. We will be meeting through the months of April and May. I would welcome any ideas that you have for informational topics that you think we should be looking at. And again, we are going to do, I think, what's become a biennial tradition in this committee, but hearing some of our members from both sides of the aisle, their ideas on bonding projects that involve transportation. So there's a lot more to come. Stay tuned. We're going to be on the floor quite a bit in the next week or two. If we can fit in a meeting, perhaps in the morning before session, we may do that. But that's something that Representative Petersburg and I are going to be working on together. So again, thanks so much, everybody. And I look forward to our continued work together this biennium.
Thank you, Chair Hornstein. Representative Nelson, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to apologize for being unmuted when and apologize to Representative West when I was unmuted and I shouldn't have, what I said shouldn't have been on the public airways. I apologize.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. Appreciate that. And so just want to thank everybody for being nice to me while I was chairing and making it a good open discussion. And I really appreciate it, all the cooperation. And so our next meeting is at the call of the chair. And look at that, we got done like about 45 minutes early. So we have a little bit of time this evening to enjoy. So thank you very much. And I will adjourn this meeting. Have a good night.